From Toronto to Tokyo, and from Thonia to Syrinx, this is The Basement, your companion to the Ready Player One novel. Join our hosts each episode for complete chapter breakdowns and deep dives into the pop culture references through a series of challenges and homework assignments. The Basement is the Ready Player One podcast for people who love things. And now, please welcome Albert and the rest of the Gunters for this week's episode. Hello, Gunters. You are in the basement. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is Chapter 12, Episode 12, MTFBWA, if I got that right. Sometimes I don't always do so. We are back again to talk about Chapter 12 of the Ready Player One novel and get into some of the pop culture references as well as the narrative. And tonight we've got two special guests with us as well. As always, we have Will Wilkins here, Mr. Will, Dr. 8-Bit Will, up there in your right-hand corner, left-hand corner, maybe as you're looking at the screen. And joining us as our special guest is a returning host. He was with us on, what was that? Was it Chapter 6 that you were on? With
one of the chapters.
SP? Yeah, one of
SP.
With SP. This is Jeremy of the Transmissions Podcast. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Great. Will, what's going on? What's new in your life? I heard you got some, you raked in some goodies there just recently.
So I actually got the premiere edition of these Star Wars NES games, but now I got the standard edition, which are in these beautiful cases that replicate the...
That is awesome.
These are awesome. They are.
All right, how much of that takes back?
These aren't that expensive. So if you get the collector's edition, you could expect to spend around $100, but it comes with all kinds of goodies. I think we talked about in one show. These ones pretty straightforward, so you can expect to pay about 30 bones each.
Yeah.
But officially licensed, so if you're a collector, these are legit.
And I have, so just because we're doing show and tell, I wanted to bring in this Lady Hawk here on VHS.
Why?
It's the real deal.
You can get in on that for $1.20.
This was $1.99, my friend.
Sir,
not
that sounds
more.
like 97 cents too much.
Surprisingly, that movie is not streaming anywhere.
Yeah, it's hard to find. This is a collector's item.
All right, Jeremy, you got to show a collectible you've got in the last week. I think that's going to be a new thing.
In the last week, I don't know. I do have this.
He broke my heart earlier. Why don't you dig that thing out?
I will get this.
All right, Jeremy, you're going to describe it.
This is a Tiger Electronics Transformers Generation 2 video game.
That's an original one?
No, they're re-releasing. Some of these.
Oh my goodness, look at the graphics.
And
that is awesome.
1993. You can see the graphics.
That is fantastic.
I haven't opened this, but one of my co-hosts also got it and opened it and beat it. And there's not that much. Essentially, like you're fighting the Constructicons and Devastator. And then the big boss at the end of the game is Starscream.
He's the big boss?
Backwards. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, what in the world? What kind of bizarre world is that?
It's crazy that they're re-releasing this, and it requires 2 AA batteries.
Yeah.
When, all these modern electronics, you can get so much on like a AAA.
Right, it takes 2 AA batteries. It's probably got like the original hardware in it, and that's why it requires
Yeah, this is probably
battery.
exactly like the original.
Yeah. Hey, so tell us about the Transmissions Podcast for any of our listeners and supporters that didn't catch you on the first episode. What do you guys do on that show? I think you guys like Transformers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, just a little bit. We just had our 7th anniversary. We talk all about Transformers. We have a show on Wednesday that's all about the toys, and a show on Friday called Alt Mode that's all about the comics and TV shows, like the new Netflix show that just came out. Any of the movies. Unfortunately, we watch the Bay movies. But there's tons of new media all the time with comics, and we review like one book or like a couple episodes of something every week.
Are you telling me that you spend an episode on an entire book? Sir, we could make that at least a year.
Yeah, well, we don't even spend the whole episode. We spend maybe like a third to a half of an episode on the review.
Oh wow. Yeah, watch this.
Yeah, here we go.
Hold my beer. We're going to do 12 pages in 2 hours.
I was here for that one part of chapter 6.
Yeah, it's a marathon. So
And before we came on the air, I think both Will and Jeremy they had measuring sticks and that and everything, trying to compare like the Transformers collection versus the NES collection. I won't tell you who won. Maybe we'll save that for another time. But anyways, Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us and coming back to the show and being here to share episode 12 with us, or at least chapter 12 with us.
Cool.
All right, let's do this. Let's get into chapter 12. We're going to start with a chapter 11 recap first off. And then we'll get into the narrative and summary. So, Chapter 11, Parzival clears the first gate by taking part in a flick sync, where he successfully recites and acts out parts as David Lightman from the movie War Games. His reward is 100,000 points for the scoreboard and a clue to the location of the Jade Key. Having been awake for hours on end, Wade finally forces himself to sleep, and he dreams that everyone is out to get him and get the egg. That kind of ends Chapter 11. Chapter 12. Wade awakes to find that the world has changed forever. He's in the first place in the scoreboard, with Artemis now in second place, and the world is abuzz with updates and news feeds about the hunt. Wade once again reflects on the history of GSS, GGS, I guess, depending on which your movie or novel. But this time, more focuses on the relationship between Halliday, Morrow, and Morrow's eventual wife, Karen Underwood. Needing to speak to someone, Wade calls H and discovers that H is on the cusp of acquiring the copper key. He wishes him good luck, responds to a competitive email from Artemis, and then attempts to solve the Jade Key riddle, but can't seem to focus on anything else but her. That's kind of how it ends. And this is a very long chapter, like in terms of like just pages. Like a lot of the other ones were real fast. This one, there's a lot of exposition, a lot of buildup, and kind of giving you a lot of context and background on what happened with the relationships between Halliday and Ogden Morrow and Kira Underwood, and how that kind of all started. So we're going to start right there. And it starts with, again, everybody's kind of buzzing. Everyone's weighing in on the recent developments of who's winning, who's in first place. And now, he's becoming a household name because he's just, he's now infamous, having been the first person to clear that first gate. And there's a lot of people that are real skeptical at this point about whether or not Z and Artie are actually together in a Gunter clan. He kind of dismisses that and thinks that obviously it's kind of bogus. But Will, I want to talk about Ogden Morrow, and we'll probably spend some time here focusing on it. But I mean, what were some of the things that stood out for you outside of like the character descriptions and all that? Because we're going to get into that when we get into the pop culture stuff. But for Ogden Morrow, this is our real big first introduction to both him. We've already got a lot from Halliday, but there is some from Halliday. But then more importantly, I think we get a lot of background here on Kira or Karen Underwood and the relationship that the three of them had.
Yeah, I think so there's two contrasting views that Ernie Klein puts together in this chapter. Like, when they do the television interview, you really get the sense that this is someone who's already lived the life and he's over it. He's past it, and it seems in a lot of ways that he's speaking directly to the protagonist like the entire time that he's being interviewed. But then as they're recounting the history of working with Halcydonia, they kind of paint him from that image of where he was, almost how I look at Bill Gates today, right? Like, I guess anytime you look at any Silicon Valley guy, you imagine how they were wide-eyed and excited to take on the world when they were kids, and then how they grew and evolved, and eventually, just beaten down by capitalism.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's kind of where he's at, and we get a little bit more of that. I mean, he's obviously retired later on in the chapter, like way later in the book when he comes back. We get some more information about what he's been doing, what his lifestyle is like. I think he shows up like in a bathrobe and like bunny slippers. So, I mean, he's just mailed it in. He's done. He's retired. He's a true retiree at that point. But Jeremy, there's one part in here too, and I don't know if you had a chance to kind of refresh on the novel or not, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but there is one part in here in the novel in chapter 12 when they're talking about him, and he makes a comment to the reporter about, it almost seems like he's not like he's completely distanced himself from cheating or being aware of what's going on. And then later on we find out he actually is listening in and eavesdropping, and he's been monitoring H and been monitoring Parzival, and so he's almost not being 100% truthful here. But I think it's the concept I think is awesome that he was able to, he's kind of like the gatekeeper. He's almost a security guard and ensuring that the integrity of the game, as he says later on the road, is still kept intact and that people aren't cheering. But do you think he was really and purposely being truthful here? Or do you think he was lying and just really didn't want to disclose it because he couldn't disclose anything like that?
I think it was where he was talking to the protagonist and not, he was speaking a truth from a certain point of view.
No, nice.
He was not really telling the whole truth.
Yes.
Just,
He took a page out of Obi-Wan Kenobi's book, right?
Yeah.
And decided to play the certain point of view card on that one. That's for sure. And so we get to, for Gregarious Games, we learned there's a lot that we learned here. And we're going to, I don't want to mingle these two or kind of commingle them or couple them together just yet. But, Morrow marries his high school sweetheart, Kira Underwood. She's British. We come to find that out. She's from London. Both him and Halliday invite her to the gaming sessions. And there's a comment in there about everybody kind of falls in love with her and that she's really beautiful. And she's kind of like the ultimate geek and almost a tomboy early on. And, she's the one that gives Halliday the name Anorak. And he's, awkward, shy, doesn't really talk to girls. But when he's around her, he opens up a little bit more. And he uses the name Anorak when they're playing D&D, and he calls himself that. And there's a line in there that kind of talks about whether or not he was doing that because he was smitten with her and he was trying to appeal to her, really want her. It seems like everybody was kind of after her. And it's not, I hate to say this, but, growing up, and Will, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but growing up, especially in the 80s, 90s, whenever there was somebody that was of the female sex interested in gaming or interested in much less role-playing games, I mean, this is like the holy grail, right? Everybody would gravitate to that person. And today it feels silly because now there's so many, there's women and girls all over the place in all of these things, which is really awesome. But back then it was kind of like a rarity, an extreme rarity at that.
Yeah, I would say there were no females, exactly 0 in our circle until 90-something. And I still don't have a model that's into video games she'll watch select games, but she's certainly not going to roll dice with anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeremy, do you guys have any, do you have a lot more females? Have you noticed an uprising in your listeners and supporters for your show over the last, just 5 years or so?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more females interested in just general geek things, which they probably have always been interested in it,
yes,
but it's more true. With the internet, people are able to express themselves better. And in Transformers, some of the recent comic book runs that just ended, they were more, I guess, written to where a lot of women, attached themselves to it. They were more interested in the storylines. It was I guess more character driven than action.
Yeah.
And they brought in a lot of women, and
How many women? Who are these women?
Check Twitter. There's tons, and
there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, if you go to a Transformers convention or pretty much any convention, I would say a good 70% of any cosplayer is going to be females.
Yeah.
It's how, if you're interested in, I'm trying not to be sexist, but if you're interested in things like clothes or
what the heck,
I'm just saying, I'm
just messing with you.
That's a neat way to.
If you're going to start a sentence with not to be sexist,
I'm not trying to stereotype anyone. Yeah, I'm just saying,
Albert,
if
do
that's
you
your
have
interested,
a human resources department here?
No, we don't.
That's a way that you can express your geekdom using your interests.
So you're hitting
my
on
interests
something.
are computers, and
Yes.
I ended up podcasting.
No, you're right, and you're actually hitting on something that. And so all joking aside, I think you're hitting on something pretty key here, right? Mm-hmm. Like to your point earlier, it's not that females suddenly started coming into these things. They've always been there, right? Now, yeah, granted, there wasn't as many. I get that. The thing that I think you're touching on is there's a lot more entry points, right? It's not just about the video game itself, right? Now it's about the characters. It's about the conventions. It's about, streaming online, and it's about the socializing with other people and all that. Those are the aspects, regardless if you're male or female, that I think have really opened up a lot of the geekdom and the culture itself and allowed a lot of people to kind of come in. And that transcends even age, right? I mean, you see people out there that are older streaming, but you look how many kids are really young that we didn't have the technology, right? And so it's really bringing in a lot of different people from different backgrounds, sexes, races, whatever the case may be, and it's allowing these IPs to flourish in ways that they never really had the opportunity to do so. it's not so much a clique anymore or a small group of people that were, cowering in the corner playing tabletop role-playing games. Now you've got full-on live streaming shows of this with some really amazing women that are playing out, and amazing young people and amazing old people, and all across different races and genders.
I mean, if you look at it, even if it wasn't just intimidating going to a D&D session of nothing but guys, and being like the center of attention because you aren't one.
Yep.
It would just, you wouldn't really be accepted because they would probably not really accept you as one of their own. Whereas today it's, like
Different ballgame.
Yeah, we have a RPG, like a live play show on our network, and it's been just crazy just how many people are going nuts over D&D stuff now.
Yeah.
It's open to everybody.
It's cool to be a D&D player these days, for sure. All right, so let's get back to the narrative. So, they go ahead and, so Kira and Morrow graduate from high school. She travels back to the U.S. and she becomes the first Gregarious Games employee, and they've kind of got her doing a lot of different things, right? And that all of this plays into a little bit later, and I'm really trying not to jump into that right now. And then obviously a couple of years later, they get married, and in 2022, Morrow resigns from the company for personal reasons. He says that they were no longer in the business of making video games, which is we'll get to at some point here later on in the novel. And there's rumors flying around that they had a big fallout, him and Halliday. Was Kira part of it? Probably, because they were both smitten with her. They both liked her. Ogden then retires to Oregon. He creates House Adonia, like Will mentioned, and which is a game company that creates educational software. They never have kids, and then in 2034, she dies of a car accident. And so from that point on, Morrow lives and resides in Seattle. And then he talks about how when they held a conference, that once Halliday did die, he makes a comment that they hadn't really spoken in over a decade. Later on, and sorry for the spoilers, but later on we come to find out that actually is a true statement. But again, Jeremy, like you said, it's from a certain point of view. They did not speak for a decade, but right after that decade ended, or just recently right after he died, there was a conversation that was had between him and Halliday, and it goes back to this whole point of Halliday just in trying to entrust somebody with the security and the integrity of the game and the hunt, knowing that people would be trying to exploit it, like the IOI and Sorrento and everybody else. So he's been the champion of that. Let's see. We learned some of the contest rules, right? Former employees can't be a part of the hunt, nor can their immediate family members. And then here's one thing, and well, I want you to speculate, because we know that Ready Player 2 is coming out, right? It's coming out here in just a few months. There's been a lot of talk. We've theorized about what possibly this could be and who's going to be involved and that sort of thing. And I do want to do a show on that alone. But there's an interesting quote in this chapter that says, this is the interviewer interviewing Morrow. He says, "Did you have any idea what Halliday was working on all those years when he was in seclusion?" The reporter asked. "No," said Morrow. "I suspected he might be working on some new game. Jim was always working on a new game. For him, making games was as necessary as breathing. But I never imagined he would be planning something of this magnitude." And I think the key line for me in that, as I think about Ready Player 2, is the idea that he was always working on a game. And so maybe, well, I'll let you theorize. Do you think there's anything in that? Do you think that we're going to get another game from Halliday? Because even maybe after death, in some way, he was working on the next video game.
Well, I wasn't sure when I was reading the passage whether or not he was talking about this game as the game, or whether there was a game within the game. Mm-hmm. But, frankly, I read this passage at face value. I didn't really look at it as a forward-thinking statement. For me, it was just, look, we all know people who operate this way, that when they're in their element, it's what they were born to do. It's what they were gifted to do. So he wasn't capable of doing anything else. I don't, you know me well enough, Albert, to know that I'm not the one to speculate on sequels, and I don't go to message boards to try to figure out what's happening on conspiracy theories for moving forward. I just try to take it in as it comes. I paid the price on a couple of those Star Wars prequels, though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. And I'm in the business of theorizing and speculation, doing that other little show that we do. But yeah, so for me, I've already got the whole thing mapped out in several versions of it. So, and none of them will be right. I'll tell you right now. but I am fine with it. I will put myself out there at some point and give you my theories on all of that.
Well, the problem I have with that is I call it the lost syndrome. Like, I was in all of, like, the Hatch, and I followed all of that stuff when, Lost was probably hitting its stride in the third, fourth season.
Yep.
And by the time that they were ready to conclude the show, there were so many exceptional fan theories out there of how it should end that they had no chance in Hades of making that show work. I mean, none. There was no way it was going to meet the expectations of the fan base.
Yeah. Sorry, Jeremy, what'd you say?
No, I was just saying, it could never live up to what the fans have gotten in their heads.
Right. Yeah. And that's a headcanon's a bitch. We talk about that a lot, and it's very, and that's why you find a lot of shows, regardless across the board, really, not just Star Wars or Ready Player One, or a lot of people don't want to put themselves out there just for the fallback and some of the flack you get from people after you realize that this stuff didn't come true. But I think that was the fun. I mean, growing up in the 80s, when the Star Wars movies were out, we had a great time just theorizing, and it wasn't like today where you were put on a cross if you didn't get it right, or you said something stupid, or you didn't make sense with them, or didn't resonate with somebody else. I think a lot of that is lost these days, and I don't mean that literally lost, but yeah, a lot of it is lost. That we don't see that as much. Just two more things here in the narrative before we get into the pop culture. So Parzival, he's feeling a lot of anxiety about what's going on. He really needs to just talk to somebody. He wakes up saying he can't even believe what happened. That this is all kind of just happening so fast, and he's the front runner and all that. And so he calls H, primarily because he's the only person, he's his best friend, and is one of the few people he can actually truly trust. He gets wind that H is right outside the Tomb of Horrors. He gives him a clue there about, hey, you might want to brush up on Joust. And so, the theory that I have here, they mentioned that Artemis, she says something like, I work better under pressure, or I work better under competition. But you get the sense that Wade is the same way. Like, I have a hard time not believing that he didn't help Artemis because he really wanted somebody to help drive the competition. Yeah, there were other ulterior motives there because he really liked her and he was trying to, come on to her or whatever. But that's one way. He helps him. He helps H here as well. He helps Shoto and Daito. And you could argue that he's just a genuinely good person who really wants to help people. But I think there's a self-indulging piece of this as well, in that by doing so, he's breeding competition and knows that, and maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, I think he's doing this so that he can actually perform better, knowing that there are other people that are just kind of overshadowing him. This comes back to really bite him, because at one point he just drops out of the top, I think 3 or 4 at least, later on in the novel. But Will, I'm going to ask you just a general question. I already know the answer, but for our viewers and listeners, do you work better under pressure competition, or does that not resonate with you?
No, I need pressure. I operate far more effectively under pressure. If my blood pressure's not like 144/93, I'm not getting anything done, right? I'm going to wire myself up. I think it's kind of like fighters who go into a bout and they have to find some personal slight that the other fighter has done in order to be effective in the ring. I think a lot of us, when we're at the office, although be it far more peacefully, have that same chip. It is the chip that feeds us, that allows us to be excellent at what we do. And there's nothing like a deadline someone can't reach that motivates us. There's some people like us that, and I know you're the same way, Albert, I'm the guy that wants the ball. I don't want the easy jobs. Give the easy jobs to somebody else. There's no laurels in that. I want the jobs that people say can't be done in the time frame or the budget that they need to be done within. Right? That's where legends are made, sir.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And I think he's like that. I think all of these guys really like that. Maybe not H, but everybody else seems to be kind of driven by that same kind of passion. At least in this the novel here. There's also, the mention of IROC comes back and haunts him a little bit later, right? IROC gets wind that the H and Parzival are kind of they're on Ludus, and this all comes back to bite him really badly, seriously, later on in the novel. And then the other thing that kind of happens here before we close out the chapter is he responds to the email to Artemis. And he's kind of congratulating her at first, clearing the first gate. It seems real kind of high level, that kind of thing. And he kind of casually invites her to hang out. Hey, if you ever want to get together. I'm not reading it verbatim, but
No, clearly not.
Yeah, clearly I'm not.
Hey, I got a question for Jeremy, though, before we get too far into this. Because I really, over the last couple of chapters, I don't like the way he's treating H. This is his best friend. Bro, if I didn't call you for days after I was doing stuff that was on the news, and I get that there's the whole Gunter thing, but, you know, they reiterate at least 20 times in this 4-chapter span about how they're best friends, and he doesn't give him a call. So I'm wondering if Jeremy... What is a major event that occurred in your life where you did not tell someone? It doesn't have to be your best friend. It could be a family member. It could be your spouse. You did not engage them, and you justified it.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to cue the Jeopardy music here, so don't worry. Take your time.
Okay. I would
It
say
could be a large transformer expenditure you kept from your wife. That would also qualify.
there's too many of those to
I was
count.
going to say, that's like, what are you talking about? That's like
Those
every day.
just kind of show up, and I don't know who got me that.
That happens to me too. Like I have all these packages, and wife walks in, and she's like, "What are all these packages?" I'm like, "I don't know, honey. They just keep bringing stuff to the house. I
Jonesy
not
sent
ordering
it to me.
It's all Jonesy that's sending this
Yeah.
stuff over.
I think probably the biggest thing I can think of is when I applied to grad school, because it was just like I was kicking around in my head for a while, and I just sprung it on my wife and was like, "Oh, by the way, I've done this." And
What was her reaction?
she was just like she knew I was kind of like considering it, but she was like, "Wait, you've already applied?" Like, yeah, I have the GRE next week, and that's the under pressure thing. I took the GRE with like 4 days of preparation.
That is incredible.
I
Wow.
didn't say I excelled at it, but I got into grad school.
Yeah,
That's all that matters.
that's all that
Like,
matters.
It might as well just be a pass-fail thing.
Yeah.
No one, it's like, it's one of those things like when you get your, I joke about this all the time. I'm like, no one ever asks you your GPA when you get your doctorate. They just, you just tell them, "Hey, I'm Dr. Wilkins." Someone says, "What's your GPA?" So I am forced to tell them all the time since nobody will ask me.
You wanna know?
Yeah. If you're the first in your class in med school or last in your class, you're still a doctor.
That's a fact.
That is very
You're
true.
You're still making my burger.
All right, well, let's get into. We're going to dive into the pop culture now, and let me add this in here. We'll jump in here, and so the first thing we have. So if you guys are joining us for the first time, haven't listened to the show for the first time, we kind of dive into all of the pop culture references one by one, give you the references, and tell you way more than you probably need to know about what's happening. And we're going to start with this one. So this reference here, it says, it had almost been 6 years since Morrow had last spoken to the media, but he didn't seem to have aged a day. His wild gray hair and long beard made him look like a cross between Albert Einstein and Santa Claus. That comparison was also a pretty good description of his personality. So we'll talk about both of these. First thing, let's talk about Albert Einstein. So he was I don't even know if you don't know who Albert Einstein is. I don't know what's wrong with you, but he was born 1879, died in 1955. He was a German theoretical physicist. He started off as a patent clerk. I mean, all this stuff, like you hear about this over the years. And as I was going through, I'm like, oh yeah, I heard about that too. He had his PhD by the age of 26. So, pick it up or get out of here because that's pretty low. He was cranking out papers on relativity and mass to energy equivalents around that time. In 1940, he was made a U.S. citizen. And I want to just talk about, he's got a lot of crowning achievements, and a lot of them are way over my head. So I'm not even pretend to understand what the hell this guy was talking about half the time. But I mean, Will, when you think about Albert Einstein, what comes to mind? Is it the look? Is it the hair? Is it his background? Is it EMC equals or E equals MC squared? What is it that the first thing you think of when you think of Albert Einstein?
It's got to be the poster. It seems like in the 80s, just about every other kid, at least those that ran in my crowd, had the consummate Albert Einstein poster on their wall. And I think, to your point, I think all those things follow shortly thereafter. Hair equals MC squared, Nobel Prize in theoretical physics. I think all of those things just fall into line. That's what comes. And then, of course, the entire thing with Germany, the atomic bomb, all of that. Even though he wasn't really involved in that. He wasn't in the Manhattan Project at all.
Right.
the government didn't trust him enough to include him within the design team.
Yeah, no, I mean, they were still skeptical because he was born, I think, in Germany, if I'm not mistaken.
So was I, but you trust me, Albert.
It took a while, though. It did take several years. Just very recently, I started to trust you. Jeremy, what about you for Albert Einstein? Like, what comes to mind for you? Like, what when you think about him?
The hair has to be first.
The hair?
Yeah. But I think, yeah, it's just everything that he did, just coming from essentially nothing, being a patent clerk, and then, his brilliance. But
yeah,
I think these days when I think about him, it's more the parodies, like the Dr. Scratch and Sniff from the Animaniacs, Doc Brown. I mean, all of the characters in pop culture, they're clearly influenced in looks and, way they talk or whatever, just based on him.
Yeah. I mean, he was almost a caricature, right? You could say that about him in a lot of different ways. I try to look into his personality because, facially and his physical characteristics, I get, right? He's got the disheveled hair, he's kind of a mess, right? And all that seems to, like, I can put two and two together with him and Morrow. But the problem I had is, as I was reading more into his personality, these are just some of the words that were used by people that knew him, whether it was his family members or people that were very close to him at different times of his life. They labeled him as being a genius. Okay, no shocker there. Disheveled, which we talked about, that he was usually deep in thought. Like, he would just kind of space out at times and just be really encapsulated in whatever he was thinking about at the time, and it was really hard to break that. Another one I read was that he was not very sociable, but he had bouts at times, particularly whenever he was talking to females. So I don't know what that means, but he was very secluded, kept to himself a lot. But whenever there were just times when he would just suddenly change and completely do a 180 and start talking and being very kind of sociable, which I think is kind of like this picture here. Like, I would never, I mean, I think that's one of the cool things about this picture. And I'm showing the picture of Einstein with his tongue sticking out. That one is, you look at the other, I cropped them out, but there are two other people there, and I do forget, so I apologize who those two are. But they seem out of place too. Like, they're kind of surprised that he's kind of doing this, but you never kind of knew what you would get with him, depending on what day it was.
But he was early in his life. He was far more structured, right? So he almost went through this bell curve where he was like, not a great student, didn't pay attention, in class. And I guess really to, some teacher's philosophy, he was just bored by it. But then as he got older, he was far more structured. I think when I was looking through the facts about Albert Einstein, that I was looking for something I didn't know that was beyond the surface. And I didn't realize that for his first wife, Mileva, that he actually built a contract for their marriage. And did you find that, Albert, while you were doing your research?
No, I've heard about this, and it seemed very, what's the character from, what is it?
Big Bang Theory?
Yes, Big Bang Theory.
It is absolutely something Sheldon would write.
Yes.
And I actually think they probably got that Sheldon roommate contract from this. So I'm going to read you a brief excerpt of the conditions he set for his wife prior to marriage.
This is a Dwight thing, too. You remember that episode of The Office when Dwight was wanted to have the baby with what's her name, and he wrote the contract out? Yeah. Anyways, but go on.
A, you will make sure that 1, my clothes and laundry are kept in good order. 2, that I will receive my 3 meals regularly in my room. 3, that my bedroom and study are kept neat, and especially that my desk is left for my use only. B, you will renounce all personal relations with me insofar as they are not completely necessary for social reasons. 3, I further demand that you will stop talking to me if I request it.
What in the world?
I'm going to get my wife on one of these.
Yeah,
see how that works.
Good luck with you. Let me know if you need a place to crash after you present that to her.
I'm going to say, like another fellow genius, Albert Einstein, thought I would offer this up to you.
Oh boy, that's not going to go well. The other real quickly, the other traits were he was persistent, impatient, inquisitive, and rebellious too. So, all those traits I think kind of fit in with what I picture Ogden Morrow to be. And the only thing that it's kind of a contrast I think for me is when you read the novel, he does seem more social. But to be fair, there's not a lot of moments in there where you get to see Ogden Morrow. We get to see him here. Beyond this, he doesn't show up again really throughout the novel until the very, very end when he brings everybody to Seattle. But nonetheless, let's talk about the other thing here. And this is Santa Claus. So Santa Claus was started like in 1733. he's still around to this day, from what I understand. Still doing his thing. And the modern day Santa is really based on a lot of different characters. And to be honest, I kind of knew this high level, that there were a lot of cultures and a lot of traditions that kind of fed into what we know as Santa Claus. I didn't realize just how many of these things. He is Frankenstein from a lot of different cultures and a lot of different traditions and that sort of thing. But the first Saint Nicholas, he's named after the Saint Nicholas of Myra, who was a Christian bishop around the fourth century. Seems weird saying that. And who was known for his generosity, particularly towards those of lower incomes, the poor, right? And then I got into this like really macabre story about how this saint's bones were like buried, and then they were separated, and they existed in two places, and they were finally brought together, and the sarcophagus was completely destroyed. I mean, it was crazy what was happening here. But then I thought, okay, well, it's the 4th century, so what do you expect? Those people were kind of nuts to begin with. The second, he's based on Father Christmas, which, that's where he gets most of his character traits, like, a large man in a green and red lined suit. He brings good cheer and spirit, bringing joy and peace. The name itself, Santa Claus, comes from the Belgium and Netherlands of Sinterklaas, which, from there they got like Yuletide is another celebration that happens around that time. And in Yuletide, they had something called the Wild Hunt, where there was this person that would fly across, the sky, and he had a really long beard. And so that's where we get the buggy and the reindeer come from, another thing. So again, it's just a lot of different stuff that's kind of piecemealed together. But Jeremy, more importantly than all of that, in terms of how we get to Santa Claus, which one of these Santa Clauses would you say is the one that you remember, or do you have a better one that I didn't come up with? And I've got a couple different ones here on screen right now. You got Edmund Gwynn over here from Miracle on 34th Street. I've got Tim Allen from the Santa Claus. I've got Tom Hanks from the Polar Express, which is actually, that's weird. This is the second time we brought up the Polar Express, because we were talking about Eddie from on the last episode. And then I've got Ed Answer from Elf, which is kind of a more modern day Santa Claus that everybody seems to like. But are any of these the Santa Claus that you grew up with, or are you Jewish?
No, I'm not Jewish. I think probably the Tim Allen one is the one I grew up with.
Is it really?
Yeah. I mean, you have your Miracle on 34th Street that, your parents play every Christmas.
Right. You're forced to watch that one until you realize how wonderful it is.
Right. But, outside of the Coca-Cola Santa Claus, it's probably Tim Allen.
The Coca-Cola. Oh, I didn't put that one in here.
Yeah,
that's a great one. Yeah,
Coca-Cola did so much to also present that image of Santa Claus.
Yeah, yes. Coca-Cola created the Santa Claus image. It didn't look anything like that. Like if you look at Saint Nicholas or Santa Claus from the Netherlands, he's skinny. He has the whole red garb going on, and he's got a crazy outfit, but he's actually lives in the off season in Spain. So I don't know how familiar you are with
taking in the beaches.
I don't know. So I used to go to Aruba quite a bit. That's a Dutch colony. So they celebrate Christmas a little different than we do. In fact, the second largest city in Aruba is San Nicolas. It's named after old Saint Nick.
What?
Right? But their traditions are a little different. Are you familiar with Black Pete?
Who?
Have you ever heard that?
Is that the guy that we knew in high school that sat in the back?
Oh, no, sir.
Oh.
So Zwarte Piet, or Black Pete's, always accompany Santa during the Christmas season in the Netherlands. And these are, and I'm not making this up,
oh my goodness,
white folks in blackface. So the first time I was in Aruba during the holidays and saw this, it blew my mind. My mind exploded, because I'm thinking, how do you even get away with this?
How do you, what in the world?
So when I saw that you were going to be talking about Santa Claus, I was like, oh, I'm going to go revisit that. Because in 2005, it was insane then. They can't still be doing this. And they're running around, they're throwing kids in bags, the whole thing. And they're supposed to be Moorish assistants to Santa Claus. But we all know, right?
Yeah, we are, right. We know what
the
that
Dutch
is.
people know. But interestingly...
That's terrible. Wait, so Will, are they still doing this today?
Yeah, still happens. It's a huge part. In fact, the survey that was done of the Dutch population, I don't know how accurate this survey is, because it's a survey.
And it's on the internet.
Said, yeah, it's on the internet, that 92% of the Dutch population supports the use of Black Pete. So... that being said, on August 10th of this year, just a couple of weeks ago, Facebook said they were going to ban all images or references to Black Pete moving forward, right? And that it would be prohibited images. So the country's in uproar right now because some of the population thinks it's an inherent part of their culture, and another piece thinks that, hey, this is just reinforcing a stereotype that doesn't have a place in modern civilization. So they're trying to find this happy meeting point where you can have what they're calling Sooty Pete, who just is dirty from climbing through the chimney, so he's just got a little dirt on him, or Chimney Sweep Pete.
Right.
Right. And then some of the far left have actually tried to get Black Pete renamed as Rainbow Pete, or they've actually filed a petition, and I'm not making that up. That pun is in the documents.
Oh, my goodness.
To have it removed or at least changed to something else. But everybody has weighed in on this subject, including Kim Kardashian. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. But that's absolutely tragic. I mean, I can't believe that isn't even happening. That's how ignorant I am of what's happening outside of the U.S. I mean, I think we got our own problems here, but wow, that's still happening or even considered to be culture. Like at one point, slavery was considered culture here, and we had to just suck it up and do away with it. So that would be my advice to anybody that's still holding on to those traditions. But more importantly, what's your favorite Santa Claus?
Oh, Miracle on 34th Street. That's a no-brainer for me, because that's what I think I wanted Santa to be when I was a kid, right? So Tim Allen was, just put in that position who didn't want to be Santa Claus. Santa Claus was, he was saintly, right? So I think he embodied all the characteristics that, Edmund really became Santa Claus. And to some point, this is a great actor. He was making films in 1916, did the crossover from, soundless movies to the speakies. Impressive. A career of over 45 years. But really, once he did this role, he didn't get cast for much else. He's pretty much Santa Claus.
I think, you would think he's one of the very first typecast people. I don't think they really did, to your point, did much with him after this.
Oh, I was going to mention to you, also, you brought up let me make it 3 references to
the Polar Express.
Hey, so I was watching this, I don't know, some random YouTube video that fired up when I was in the middle of a midnight spiral. But the Galveston Train Museum, if you've never done this, here in the great state of Texas, does a Polar Express. Does the whole thing. Yep. There's like a video out there where they kind of walk you through it, but the production value I thought was pretty impressive. So if you're looking for something to do with the kids this Christmas, Albert, they're getting old, take them to the Polar Express in Galveston.
Huh. We have one up here in Wisconsin that does the same thing.
Yeah. So you get the train ride, you get to go through the hot chocolate dance, and they do all that. You get to go on top of the train as well?
No, I was looking for that, some kind of safety issue. But yeah, you do. It looked like the actors were on point. They did a really good job of setting the scene and doing some early stuff. Hey, Jeremy, you said there's one up there in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I guess y'all didn't have to use fake snow like we do.
No. We get the real thing.
Bring it in, guys. Back it up. Back the truck up. Dump it off right here, please. Thank you. All right. Well, so from all of this, this is Ogdemaro, some combination thereof of Santa Claus and some of the pictures we got here, and then obviously with Albert Einstein, but we spent way too much time on that. Okay, let's move on to our next reference. And this one's going to get, I don't want to get too depressing here, but the reference is Morrow and Halliday had grown up together, founded a company together, and changed the world together. But Morrow had led a very different life from Halliday's, one involving a much greater connection to humanity and a great deal more tragedy. Now, what I want to talk about is, I've got 3 pictures up here. I've got a character, he's a Greyhawk character from Dungeons & Dragons named Merlin. I'll come back to that in a second. The other 2 pictures, I've got one of Mary Jo Powell, who was Gary Gygax's wife. And in the bottom picture, I've got a wedding picture of Mary Jo Powell and a very, very young Gary Gygax. And he had just come back from, he was in the military, he served under the Marine Corps. They had known each other. The story is, and this is why I wanted to bring this up, because earlier we were kind of talking about the relationship between Ogden Morrow, Halliday, and Karen, and that is not unique. I mean, Ernie Klein took the story or that was happening here with Gary Gygax, Mary Jo Powell, and Don Kay, and he used parts of it. Now, the characters are a little flipped. So here's the story that happens here. So Gary, Don, and Mary Jo all grew up. They knew each other since they were about 6 years old. They went through middle school together. Eventually, Mary Jo left. She came back, I think, in high school. And then the three of them were, they didn't really talk to each other, Mary Jo Powell and Gary Gygax. But right after they graduated, he went to the military. He got really slimmed down, became really muscular, came back, and really went after her. Like, she was kind of like the girl. I mean, you can see her. She's stunning. Like, I'd never realized how gorgeous she was. But when he came back from the military, he got honorably discharged. He came back and she saw him, and he was a totally different person, looked completely physically different as well. And so they ended up getting married. And this really burned Don Kay, because Don Kay was in love with her as well. I mean, he was at least attracted to her and smitten with her, right? And so that's kind of where he got this from. And now the story between Gary Gygax and Mary Jo Powell doesn't really end that well. I mean, eventually they get a divorce, and Gary gets into cocaine, and there's all kinds of other stuff. And I've got some information that I'll share here in a second about where a lot of this great background is, and the background story around Gary Gygax and TSR and how all that started. But sadly, Don Kay, who I guess in this real world scenario would actually be the Halliday, right? Gary Gygax is really the Ogden Morrow. But when you think about the characters in Ready Player One, you almost think Halliday is Gary Gygax, if that makes sense, right? So he's kind of flipped it just a little bit here in terms of who's playing who. But sadly for Don Kay, he died of, he had a heart condition, and there are not a lot of public pictures out there. Like, I really had a hard time finding anything that was a picture. The closest I found was an old yearbook picture that was so blurry that you couldn't even make out that was actually him. So I didn't use it. But I did use Merlin, which is the character that he created in the Greyhawk series when they started Dungeons & Dragons, or TSR. And that's honestly the best I could come up with. But so, Jeremy, were you aware of any of this, that all this had happened? Or I guess, one, that this life that Gary Gygax and Mary Jo Powell lived, or even that this was actually being used in Ready Player One, and that Ernie was kind of flipping the characters on us a little bit there?
I didn't know a lot about it. I recently finished a book by Flint Dilley, who wrote on Transformers and G.I. Joe and stuff. And he also was friends with Gary and did a lot of stuff with him. And in his book, The Games Master, there's a lot about Gary, but I think it was more either after this or kind of maybe during the divorce. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But
what was the relationship between them? I mean, like, what were they doing stuff together, like building things, making things?
Yeah,
games?
doing Flint was working with him on making some D&D campaigns, I believe, and
so they were game players or playing.
well, yeah, I mean, it was not really on the Hollywood side. It was more on the designing games and coming up with stories and stuff like that.
Yeah. I want to show one thing here too, and Will, I know you had a comment on this earlier. This is actually so, and very similar to what we heard, right? Kira in the novel goes back to Gregarious Games, and she ends up working for them. And he kind of mentions she has a lot of different roles. This is really the same thing that happened with Mary Jo Powell. When she came back and she started working at TSR, she did everything that she did. She wore a lot of proverbial hats. Everybody got business cards, and she didn't get a business card. And so they actually, and I forget the gentleman's name, he actually went out and made her own custom business card. And this is actually what I've got up here. This is an actual business card that was given to her. It's got her name on there. It says Mary P. Gygax, the woman at TSR Hobbies. And then her roles are plant tender, coffee maker, cleaning lady, typist, and secretary. And that little picture down there of the secretary where she's kind of being chased, that's supposed to be, he actually drew Gary Gygax kind of chasing her around the office, and I don't know, trying to get in a squeeze, I guess, from whenever he could. But these were the actual business cards that she was using.
Ironically, when he left her for his next administrative assistant. So
right.
That could actually be a picture of her in that,
Well,
that lower
really
right-hand
good.
picture.
Uh,
That's the next one coming up. Significantly younger. Just
maybe
saying.
at this point, maybe she was just the only woman, but there was later.
Maybe. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Didn't realize that's only, Geneva is only like an hour and a half away from me.
Is it really?
Oh.
Yeah, that's where Gen Con started. Jen coming from Geneva and all that. It's a very interesting. There's a lot of great history here behind Dungeons and Dragons, and if you're interested, there's two things I would recommend. This first one here has not come out yet. It's a documentary. It was started on Kickstarter. They've already met. They've like quadrupled what they needed to get the documentary going. And it's called The Dreams in Gary's Basement, and it really is truly about Gary Gygax and early on in life. I'm sure it's going to touch on some of the stuff that's happened here that we've talked about with Mary Jo Powell, their relationship, his rise with TSR to the point where he was living in a, barely making it to, I think at one point, he's living out in Hollywood and, snorting coke and doing whatever famous people do, all the way until its failure and before he felt like he just was going to lose it all. So that's a great documentary. Again, it's not out yet, but you can go pre-order it and buy it on Kickstarter called Dreams, the Dreams in Gary's Basement. The other one that's out is a book. It's called Empire of Imagination, and this is by Michael Whitweir, who's actually the brother of Sam Whitweir. So if you follow Star Wars, he's the one that does the voice for Darth Maul. He did the voice for Force Unleashed. He's a huge Star Wars fan. He does role-playing games. I think he does Critical Role, or he's on there from time to time.
His show on DC Universe was so much fun. He did
he's awesome.
All-Star Games with Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of. But this is his brother, Michael, and Michael has done this. He's done the Arcana book that came out just recently. That's got all the, like, a historic view of all the different artwork that was released for Dungeons and Dragons. And he's actually working on a cookbook now. That's a Dungeons and Dragons cookbook, which is coming out, I think, in October or November. So I've pre-ordered that. But anyways, these two, this book and this documentary, give you a lot of insight into Dungeons and Dragons and Gary Gygax and TSR and tactical studies and all that stuff if you're really interested. So go check them out whenever they come out.
So, Albert, now we didn't talk about this, but the company that they set up, Halcydonia, right? I did a little research because, as you know, Ernest Cline does almost nothing on accident, especially when he's referencing proper nouns in his text. So I came up with two converging theories on where this name originated from.
Really?
And so I will give them both to you, and I'd like to get your and Jeremy's opinion on which one probably holds the most water.
All right,
okay.
Go ahead.
The first comes from ancient Greece. Cydonia is a city on the northern coast of Crete, which celebrates Dictynia, which is the festival of sacrifices that is done in honor of the warrior Artemis.
What? Uh-huh.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, that's number one.
I don't think anything's going to be better than that, but go on.
That was pretty good, right?
Yeah.
2, Halcydonia in Arabic means is our master, as in teacher, and is referenced several times in the Quran.
So I can see the second one being is our master, especially when you talk about like the type of software, right? The educational software,
Right.
You're learning. I can draw a direct parallel. But man, I don't know, Jeremy, you tell me, but it feels really hard to like make a strong case for that one when Artemis is clearly called out in the first example.
Yeah, it's hard to not think that's the one.
Did we win?
I think so, man. I don't know which one's right. I couldn't find a reference for what he was doing, but man, if that is where he went, that is a deep cut. You're not finding that in Wikipedia. I'm telling you, I'm deep in the annals.
That's very true. And I wanted to, like, I was trying to think, and you guys feel free to, we don't need to spend much time on this, but I was trying to think of like software companies that came out around the 80s that were doing like educational software. And I know they were out there because we were spoon-fed these programs on our Apple IIs and our C64s and everything in school. But I couldn't think of one off the top of my head anyways without doing some research like that was actually doing it. Jeremy's got a picture up. MECC.
I don't have a picture. I have the actual floppy.
Yeah, you've got the floppy disk. You got it on a 5 and a
Who did
5 and a
Mavis Beaking Teaches Typing? Who did that one?
I don't know. Let's do some research on the fly. Go ahead and type that in if you want and look that up. Like there were like Scholastic came in later. Borderbound was doing some stuff, I think.
Oh, that's true.
Karateka.
Yeah.
Radika.
They did a lot of stuff, but I think they had a division that was doing like educational games. And it was really, that was, obviously, pleasure games, or no, that sounds terrible. Not pleasure. What am I saying? Entertainment games came in
This is
first.
a family show.
I know. Entertainment games came in first, and then they were trying to, okay, let's, bring this into like educational and bring it into the schools. And I know I was playing this stuff. I just cannot for the life of me think about like who was actually doing stuff, who was making games. Pioneer, or what is it? The Oregon Trail, right? That was one that every class that I was in elementary school that had a computer had that thing running on it. And I don't know what we learned other than I die of dysentery. That seems to be the constant in that game.
You just know that you start off in St. Louis and then you die somewhere around Kansas.
You're going to die somewhere along the way. It's your fate. Would you find anything?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Software Toolworks. That's who ended up, they eventually became Broaderbound. But when they started, they eventually partnered up in the early 80s with Pearson Education, Pearson, the publisher of umpteen million textbooks, and started developing education software.
Software Toolworks. Okay, we'll go with that. I like it. It's got to be based on somebody. I'm sure that was, the name I think I think that's a pretty clever way and a deep cut, like you said, in terms of how he came up with the name. But I guarantee you it is based on a particular software company that he was familiar with growing up that had educational software. So, all right.
Voyage of the Mimi. That was awesome.
Voyage of the Mimi?
Do you remember that?
Sound familiar.
It was like a series we watched in like 7th grade. It was about, it had a famous actor in it. I can't remember who it was. But you'd watch like a 30-minute show in like science class. Is that who it was? And then there was like, was it?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then there would be 30 minutes of a science lab experiment that you do in class. And sometimes it was on computers. Sometimes it was trying to find a way to, make water condensate so you could make fresh water. It was crazy. You don't remember that? It took up like half the school year.
No, we didn't have, I don't think, I'm looking at this now. Voyage of the Mimi. Huh. It says it was on 321 Contact as well.
Wow, look at that. Connections.
Maybe I did see this.
You got to watch this, but I'm telling you, I know it's out there now that you can buy the series, but it was watch the show and then do a lab experiment around the show. It was like we did it once a week for half the school year.
Now I'm all invested in this thing. This shouldn't be doing this, but this is
all right,
pretty
let's
interesting.
Go.
Man, look at Ben Affleck is such a good looking man.
Stay on target. Stay on target.
He was
all right,
we'll get Phantom.
All right, let's move on. Sorry. Voyage of the Mimi, we'll come back to that. Let's talk about sirens real quick. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's a really loose kind of reference, but the reference says
pun intended.
Stop it. That's not what I meant. The reference, the opposite sex made Jim extremely nervous, and Kira was the only girl I had ever seen him speak to in a relaxed manner. But even then, it was only in character as Anorak during the course of our gaming sessions, and he would only address her as Lycosia, the name of her D&D character. It's one of those. I've heard it pronounced a couple different ways, but I'm going to say Lycosia.
Oh, and all the times that it's brought up in conversation, you've heard it pronounced several different ways.
Yeah. If you go watch YouTube videos on this, there's 8 million different ways that people say this. I don't think anybody knows how to say it. But
I think the only way to know for sure is to go find the episode of Xena Warrior Princess that has her in it.
Oh, wow. There you go. See what they say?
So when I was doing research, because I don't know what that is, right? I looked it up. First return, Xena Warrior Princess,
which is a great show.
She's not a siren in the show, though. They've got a different backstory for her, unlike the Greek mythology where she's one of 6 named sirens.
Yeah. Jeremy, can you think of any game, book, novel, anywhere that you've had to play as a siren, seen one, attacked one?
No. I mean...
it's a fair response because
I guess
one time in
Assassin's
Hong Kong.
Creed, like I've been playing through Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and I'm sure being in ancient Greece there was some sirens at some point.
And I'm not trying to be funny, but it's really hard to find a lot of information. They're spoken about a long time ago, and I don't know, what was it? The Odyssey, I think, had them, and there's a bunch of other poems that I never read. We'll never go back and read where they're mentioned. But you think about like modern day, media, whether it's TV, movies, comics, whatever, they don't come up very often. In Dungeons and Dragons, they're always in Dungeons and Dragons. Like if you go out and you're in a module and eventually you make it out to like sea, you're probably going to get tempted by a siren at some point, whether you're out when you're at sea or when you land or right before you leave. And you're always going to have to fight them. I think of like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale. They're definitely in both of those games. Those were kind of computer games that came out in I think it was like 90s, 2000s, whatever it was. So it seems like it's very niche in terms of like like Dungeons and Dragons. But this was
I don't think they could agree on what mythology they were going to follow, because sirens are present, as you mentioned, in a whole bunch of works, and in some cases they're disgusting looking, and others they're cannibals. In Greek mythology, they were actually given wings for a short period of time in order to help find Persephone when she was taken to Hades, and when they didn't, they were cursed, and then they just hung out on the rocks and sang, much like hippies do.
Yes, and they were trying to lure, I guess, sailors in to kill them. I don't know what. It seemed like that's all they wanted to do was just kill you. But so I've got a picture up of some sirens here from Dungeons and Dragons. This is from the 2nd edition. This is from Monstrous Manual. For no other reason than I just want to have a picture of it. The one on the right is another picture of Dungeons and Dragons. And I will say this, the one consistent thing about D&D is that the sirens were all very good looking and they were not.
I think that's Jackie Onassis with a knife. They're on
the right. Very...
I don't know what's happening there.
They were always topless too. Although the one on the left has a top on, but I assume it's because they couldn't sew. Although no, there's some characters in there that don't, but the one on the right definitely isn't wearing a top. Yeah. I don't know what else to say there's to say about them. They've got infravision for 120 feet. All right, we're going to move on. Let's talk about FidoNet. And so the reference here says, by the end of the school year, when it was time for her to return to London, her being Kira, the two of them had openly declared their love for each other. They kept in touch during the remaining year of school by emailing every day using an early pre-internet computer bulletin board network called FidoNet. So I've got a picture up right now of FidoNet. This was kind of like the original logo. There's a little piece that's missing, but it's really not. The bowl, I think, is missing on this picture. Not that important. And it's got a name down there, JM, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. But quickly, and Jeremy, I'm going to let you kind of navigate us to this because I know you're a big FidoNet fan. But this was a bulletin board system that began in 1984 using something called FidoBBS software. And it kind of had one service that was really important, and that was email, right? They had something called NetMail that was a service that you got from the BBSs. And there was a really cool technology that they were working on, these two gentlemen, who I've got a picture of here that I'll show. But there was these two guys, they got together and said, you know what? Whenever we want to send a message to somebody, we actually have to dial into their server, right? So we're already incurring long-distance phone calls or charges. Then once we get in there, then we start typing our message, and then we hit send. Wouldn't it be cool, and wouldn't it save us a crap ton of money if we could find a way to type the email up on our computer without being logged in, and then hit send, and then let the computer make the connection automatically, send the file, and then disconnect. And
make the connection in the middle of the night when it's cheaper.
Right, when it's cheaper too, right? Yeah, the carrier costs were much cheaper, but now you're really getting into like stuff that people probably have no idea what we're talking about now. But it used to be if you dialed like during certain peak times, it would cost you more. In the after hours, it didn't cost you anything. And so and today we kind of, this is just the way the internet works, right? We're on our system and it only accesses the internet whenever it needs to. But they were doing this back when dial-up modems, and it was kind of a proof of concept thing that they were trying to do, and it worked out really well. But all of these were technologies that, that FidoNet took advantage of. But tell me your experience, Jeremy, with FidoNet. I mean, I guess you were a longtime user. Are you still using it to this day?
I haven't used it in years until you asked me to come on the show, and then I hopped back onto found some Telnet bulletin boards and hopped onto some FidoNet echoes, and I used it throughout high school and college until I really got kind of onto the internet and the web became a thing.
Yeah,
it was just like in the mid 90s when I guess the era of pro wrestling that kind of I was really into was really hitting it big. I followed pro wrestling through the FidoNet pro wrestling thing, just like you would do on a message board or website these days. And just things like that. It's just, when you are a geek and you have no life, and what I would do is like, they had these offline mailers. So basically you would download, it's called a quick packet, QWK, and basically it was a zip file with a bunch of text in it. And it would just download all of the unread messages, and then you would open them up in a reader application and read them, type your replies, and then upload your reply packet. And that was so much fun, kind of, being introduced to the entire world, because it was a worldwide thing.
And that was the store and forward methodology, I think, that they were using back then at the time. And so the two people that I mentioned were Tom Jennings was one of them. And then there was Jim Maddle, I think is his name, or John, or is it John Maddle. Yeah. I've got pictures of him. So the picture on the left-hand side, that's in 1991. So he does not look like that today. That's Tom Jennings there on the left-hand side. And that's actually John Maddle on the right-hand side here. And John is the one that created, that was initials JM, are the one that created the little ASCII art of the FidoNet dog with the little bowl there. But there's we've got some other pictures here, and I'm going to let you walk us through some of these because this is stuff. Are these recent pictures? Is this what you took when you logged in? You said recently.
I took those screenshots tonight.
Tonight. Yeah. So did you dial in with your phone line? Do you have like an analog POTS line?
Telnet.
Who has a phone line?
I was gonna. That's why I wanted to know. It'd be pretty impressive if you had that.
Yeah, these days, a number of bulletin boards are still active. You connect them through Telnet.
Never heard of it, but go on.
Yeah, I found there was an app called Sync Term that the developer also makes a lot of the bulletin board software. So it supports the ANSI art that you see here with the color. Like this is just text characters that are making this art.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
This is a bulletin board that was active when I was still living in Memphis in high school and stuff, and they
still around to this day.
Still around. I don't know if they stopped and then restarted, but so it's a Star Trek thing, and this is kind of an example of what you would see if you're reading a FidoNet message on the bulletin board, and this is from like the Windows Echo, and they're talking about malware bytes. As you can see, this was one of the most recent things, and it was from May.
Yeah, May 16th, 2020.
Not super active, but still, there are still people in there, and I'm sure if people had like problems, they could go in and people could help them.
That's cool.
If you have time to wait.
Yeah, exactly. No, what's this here? What are we looking here? It's 2009 internet.
Okay, so this one would be, I had selected some they call them echoes, they're forums, but I had selected a few to download. So this is just what I had downloaded in my packet. And you can see like unread messages versus the total.
Yeah.
And this is a program called Multimail that's an offline reader.
Echoes were, I remember Echo Mail as one of the things, which is essentially the same thing. But to your point, this was like, in the late 80s, early, all through the 90s, really, until the internet became, we'll talk about that here in just 1 minute, but until the internet really started taking off, this was what you did when you wanted to find other people that had the same interests as you. You would go out and try to find.
This was before AOL.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is the only way you could communicate. Because, you already knew you had a very small amount of people in your local areas and all that. I mean, maybe conventions and, swap meets and stuff like that. You'd probably find those people there. But this was the first entry for you to be really find people all over the United States, maybe even in the world if you had the money that had the same interests as you.
Right. I think what's fascinating about this is that it wasn't a fully automated system, so it did require administrators and it did require it have an org structure. And one of the fascinating things to me was that the way that they broke out the roles within FidoNet, they used nothing but like Italian mobster levels.
Yeah.
So you could be a Don or a Godfather or a Consigliere based on what your role was when operating within the FidoNet architecture. Did you ever reach any of those levels, Jeremy?
No, I was just a user.
I was hoping you were a consigliere. I just like saying that word.
I looked into what it would take to like start up my own BBS and link it into FidoNet, and it just seemed too complicated for the amount of time I have in my life right now. But
and the BBSs themselves. I mean, just quickly, so they. It's probably no big secret in terms of why they're not around. And today, they're still out there, right? But it's more of a hobby. It's people feeling nostalgic, wanting to jump on, issue commands, share stuff, maybe drop a message about malware bytes.
I spent a few hours last night, or a couple nights ago, playing Legend of the Red Dragon. A popular game.
Yeah. What was it emulated, or what system was that on?
I dialed into a bulletin board and played it.
Just played it directly off of that?
Yeah, and I don't know if they're running their system through an emulator or not, but I mean, you can, like, if you have a Linux system or even Windows, you can get BBS software for it.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there was a time when there was a magazine called Boardwatch, and I never had a lot of these copies, but I I came across a couple of them in the early 90s, and it was literally a magazine because, again, no internet, right? So how do you know where to call? How do you know what numbers? And with a BBS, you're actually dialing somebody's computer. You're logging into their computer and speaking to other people that are logged in. So you think about it, pre-internet, you were using your phone lines and getting charged for each one of these calls. And so it was kind of a pretty expensive thing. When you think about the internet and how it came out and people started, became much more cost effective. You weren't charged like per minute. It was kind of a flat rate for you to get online. It really put BBSs out of commission. Not to mention, don't even talk about like web browsers and the internet and how that all kind of expanded. There really wasn't a need anymore for BBSs to exist at this point because you could just go out there and get it in a lot of different ways and get it a lot cheaper.
And they hit their peak right in 1993 at about, at FidoNet anyway, with about 39,000 connected nodes, and then eventually faded into what it is today, which is almost what this show is, just a lot of nostalgia.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think AOL was probably what really was the first bullet in FidoNet, because AOL, CompuServe, Prodigy, all of those were national systems that let people connect, just much like a BBS, but it was much more user friendly, and the common non-technical computer user was more familiar with that.
Yeah. I just got 2 more pictures here that you sent over. I don't know what's going on. Are these
that's
people
just
that
a
are on your hit list?
That's just a list of messages, like if you were reading it on the bulletin board.
Yeah. 120.
I mean, it doesn't even show you like the date of these. It's just the who sent it and the title.
I see 4 terabyte hard drive with XP.
Yeah.
XP is no longer, supported by Microsoft. I just want to let you know that. And then what is this one here?
That was like as it was packing up the quick packet.
Oh, nice.
And the Blue Wave support Echo, that was pure nostalgia for me, because the Blue Wave mail reader was the first piece of software, like the shareware, that I bought. And I bought it specifically for this to read FidoNet.
So you went right back to what you were used to, what you wanted to use. Yeah.
Was your license still good? Could you still use your previously
my
purchased
floppy
license?
is bad. I actually have it.
Oh my goodness! Pull that sucker out. He's reaching for the floppy drive now, or the floppy disk, I should say. What do you still have? Like, what are you popping those things into?
What are you even doing? How much room do you have in your house? You have to throw some of that stuff away.
Oh, there it is.
I do. I have
Blue Wave 3 1/4, 3 1/2. Sorry,
3 1/2. Yeah, I pulled out a bunch of floppies just to archive them recently. I figured make images of them before the metal or the magnetic film dies.
Yeah, eventually all that stuff does die unless you get it online. So, well, cool. I want to, I don't have the time. If I did have the time, I would be still doing BBS stuff. I'd like to have my own.
We don't have time for this.
Really
no one's got time for this.
That's what I'm saying. I don't have the time, but if I did, I would.
Humans don't have time for this.
No, there's a lot of them out there.
Speaking of BBSs and Ready Player 2, do you think they're going to do anything with BBSs, kind of like they did with Ready Player 1 with, that kind of mystery game thing?
Yeah, I don't know. That would be really cool for them to do, because it is they do speak about BBSs quite a bit in the novel, and all of the pop culture stuff starts to wane, and you'll see that as our episodes continue. Maybe they'll wane too. I don't know, but in the novel, a lot of the pop culture stuff is really up front, and then once we get to the middle part, once we get to level 2, right? A lot of that stuff they don't really speak about. It's all about the modern day presence, what's going on there. But they do bring up BBSs. I mean, Ernie Klein does, and it sounds like it did have a huge impact on his life. So it would be really cool for him to kind of bring that back. And I mean, who knows? We may get a lot of the same stuff that we get here, but it would be nice for them to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, I expect him to. Hopefully, he stays in the same era when he does this. That doesn't decide to make the sequel like the mid '90s to the early aughts. Like, he needs to stay in this sweet spot where his base is. But there's still, even if you're reading through the text, there's tons of pop culture that's been left unchurned.
Untapped.
I'm sure he's talked to fans that were like, "Hey, you didn't talk about, why didn't you talk about Merc? Why aren't you doing this?" And he's got probably more material to work with in this, because now he's got this entire fandom that are feeding him ideas of what can be incorporated into the next.
And now he's
book.
probably thinking about the IP that can go into the movie before he's even writing the book.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I believe that too.
Well, and so on
there's
that note,
gold in their heels.
on that note, there was, when the Ready Player One movie came out, he's on record as saying that, it really sucked that he wasn't able to get some of the IPs that he wanted to do that were in the novel that we were all kind of expecting to be in the movie. But what that did allow him to do was expand to IPs that he didn't include in the novel that he wanted to have in, that he didn't get put in the novel that he was able to put in the movie. So like Gundam, right? That's a very loose reference in here, but that's front and center in the movie. The He-Man lunchbox was one. He mentions He-Man in here, but it's really not. It's, again, a very small reference. But he got a chance to throw a lunchbox in there. So, I mean, there's other things out there. He knows, he's acknowledged it. There's a lot more out there. So I really, again, to your point, well, I really would like for him to, I would agree. I would like for him to stay in this era, not expand beyond that, and just continue to use up and use all the pop culture stuff that's still available that hasn't been tapped yet whatsoever.
Okay, quick trivia for you, Albert. What were you more disappointed by not being in the finished film? 1, a whole bunch of Rush. 2, Star Wars. 3, Ultraman.
Ooh. So it's going to have to be Ultraman and Rush, even though I'm a big Star Wars fan. Just a little bit. I would say... okay, so my heart says Rush, but how that would translate to the movie, I don't know. I think he would have, if I had a choice, I think Ultraman probably would have done it for me, because that is another one that I grew up with, coming home from school in the early 80s, coming home and watching Ultraman right when I got home. That was a big part of my culture or my life growing up. And then reading about it and seeing the novel, or read about the novel and then not seeing the movie, it just feels like there was a huge piece of this novel that was left out. Is given the significance of Ultraman in there. But yeah, so I would say Ultraman over Rush, even though Rush is my favorite band. So,
how about you, Jer?
Well, considering I don't think I've ever heard a Rush song, and
wow,
not big into Sentai, it'd have to be Star Wars.
I knew your answer anyways, because you're a big Star Wars fan.
Hey, mine was Star Wars too, but whatever.
So they got a couple things in them, like they're
you know.
They're so
Calm
yeah,
down.
I know. No, you're right.
The things they snuck in.
Snuck in, yeah.
It's sad there was more Star Wars in the Wreck-It Ralph sequel.
Wow,
that's true. Well, and they had Disney behind them.
There was more Halo than Star Wars in the movie. That hurt me in the feels.
I mean,
speaking of feels,
I'm surprised they never really acknowledged the Superman reference for Sorrento in the movie. He was Kingdom Come Superman. So.
What was the reference? Which one was it?
His model was Superman.
Oh, I gotcha. The way he looked.
His avatar.
His avatar. No, I got you. I never caught that actually. So, wow, thank you. All right, let's talk about Wayne's World. Because we're going to be wrapping up here very shortly. But Wayne's World, let's talk about the reference. This is H saying, "This is huge. This is beyond epic. I mean, congratulations, man." He began to bow repeatedly. "I am not worthy."
I am giving you 0 points for that oration of that line.
I'm
that
sorry.
Was terrible.
It was terrible.
That was terrible. I revoke your lifetime membership of the International Thespian Society on behalf of Troop 3172.
You can't. You need my approval to do it. So, you can't make unilateral decisions like that. I'm calling Deanne Fleming right now. All right, Wayne's World. This is a movie directed by Penelope. Is it Spheris? Does anybody know Spheris? Everybody heard?
Go with it.
All right, fine. That's good. So this is the screenplay was done by Mike Myers, Bonnie Turner, and Terry Turner. It stars Austin Powers, the church lady, Tia Carrera, which was the star of the 3DO classic, The Daedalus Encounter, Soda Pop Curtis from The Outsiders, a.k.a. Rob Lowe, who, by the way,
he's a vampire.
Rob Lowe, he's what?
He's a vampire.
He's a pervert, too. But Rob Lowe, he was like, his career was tanked by this point, right? The sex tapes had come out. Nobody wanted to hire him. And there's a story that Lorne Michaels went after him purposely because they knew they could get him on the cheap. And if you talk to him now, not that I talked to him, but if you see the interviews now, he talks about how this was the best thing that happened to him. That the fact that his career tanked and he came on Wayne's World, because from this point on, people wanted him for other stuff when they really weren't looking for him prior to this. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. Some of the other famous folks, It's got Bill Murray's older brother, Brian Doyle Murphy, who plays Noah. It's got the late Chris Farley, which was actually this is his first feature film that he had ever done. Of course, he went on to do Tommy Boy and a bunch of other stuff. It's got Alice Cooper, who I think is amazing in this movie. It's got Al Bundy from Married with Children, the T-1000 from Terminator 2, Bob from Fight Club, and Diane Court from Say Anything, Ione Skye as well. So.
And you didn't know Aerosmith reference? They're the ones they bowed to in the movie.
No,
they're not worthy.
No, that's in the Saturday Night Live skit. But we'll come back to that.
No, that's in the movie.
They bowed to Alice Cooper.
It was Alice Cooper.
Yeah, but Aerosmith is in the movie too.
They are.
Okay.
They bowed to Alice Cooper.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, they bowed to Alice Cooper, but yeah, Aerosmith is in the movie. Fair. We'll concede that one. Let's see. The premise.
I will
the
bet you
tagline.
$1 on this.
The tagline was, "You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll hurl," and the premise. The premise from Internet Movie Database says, 2 slacker friends try to promote their public access cable show. That's all you need to know. I guess that's all there is. It sits at 84% on Rotten Tomatoes, and so, Will, I'm going to throw this first question out to you. We saw this movie together, I think, when it came out. Holding hands, yeah. Well, we weren't sharing popcorn, but we definitely were holding hands. But does this movie hold up well with you? Did you watch it recently?
Yes.
Do you think it
Yes,
still
I
holds
recently watched this. This movie.
All right, tell me about it.
It is one of the most highly quotable movies ever made. And I think in the rewatching, I forgot just how many ridiculous lines are in that. I mean, and some of them are predictable and softball, like, "It'll be Terry's job to give the actors their hand cues." "Excuse me, Russell, but I believe I requested the hand job." Or when Garth is like, he's like on the couch and she's like, "Take me, Garth." "Where?" "I'm low on gas and you need a jacket." The movie's great, and it spawned one of the finest Nintendo games ever made.
Oh, hold on. Let me
Wayne's
spotlight
World.
you here. 'Cause I wanted to see this. Have you played that thing?
Absolutely.
What is
It's
that?
terrible. Just like any licensed video game, Wayne's World, not great. It was actually released later in the life cycle for Nintendo, so it didn't have a huge production run. So you can find this game both on the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo.
But on Genesis too.
Yeah, the good news is, because it had such a slow production run and based on its timing, it's incredibly rare. So this game, if you want it complete in box like this one, will run you around $500 US on eBay.
What? For that game?
For that game.
And it sucks, huh? What is it? What was the
Yeah.
premise? Like, what were you doing in that game?
It was a standard platformer, except it had really buggy controls. Ultimately, it didn't make any sense what you were doing, as was the case with most licensed movie games, with the exception of Batman and RoboCop. Yeah. Still, it's $500. So.
Yeah. Jeremy, did you see this movie when it came out, and did it play a big part in, I guess, you growing up in 92?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did it inspire you?
Yeah, it moved me in ways.
Swing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, so tell me about that. When did you catch it in the theater? Was this like a home release for you? And then what were some of your more memorable favorite moments from the movie?
See, 92, I was 13.
Don't
14.
say 10. Oh.
No. So I probably saw it in the theater. Do you have what month it came out? Was it a summer movie?
I don't have the
I
month.
thought it was during the school year.
Okay.
But I'm not sure.
But anyway, I'm sure I
Look that
saw it
up,
in the
Will.
theater, but it was also a frequent rental. It was just one of those movies you can rewatch over and over. And I watched it again the other night, and I feel like it holds up just because it's not trying to be anything that it's not. It knows exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And
Valentine's Day, 1992.
okay, well, I clearly never had a date then, so
I hope not.
I did. It was Albert.
Yeah, my date was him. Look at that. That's what
but I mean,
felt last
now it was different watching it recently because now I live so close to Chicago and I've been there a few times. Whereas when I first saw it, I'd never been to Chicago, and now I'm like seeing all these things that are familiar, and it's just it's really weird.
No, I can't imagine. And
I can only imagine like being from Chicago at the time, seeing like your city featured in the movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia for me from this movie because even after we had seen it, it was a movie that I know I watched a number of times and I don't want, we're going to talk about this. We won't talk about this sequel, but I can honestly say, I actually have never seen Wayne's World 2.
Huh?
I've never seen it. And I was thinking about it. I was like, wow, I've actually never seen it. I don't even know why I've never seen it. There's something happened, probably dark part of my life that I never got around to seeing it. But I definitely watched this one a lot of times, and it kind of just hits you almost immediately because the movie starts with like the Chia Pet and the clapper, and those things are very specific to that time frame, right? And you think about 1992, those were kind of big things around the late 80s, early 90s, and the infomercials that were coming on. And so that stuff, I don't know that it holds up well. I don't know that people would actually see that and kind of acknowledge it. Although Chia Pets seem to still be around. The clapper's gone. I mean, that's a joke now, kind of gag
now
gift
you
that
have,
you buy.
Echoes and stuff.
Right, yeah. We've got the more sophisticated Amazon Echoes and Google Homes and Nests and whatever else they do. I've got a scene up right now from the Bohemian Rhapsody piece. And this is a scene that I think is kind of iconic. And there's a great story in there where originally this was almost going to get cut out. And Mike Myers was like pretty adamant that it could not get cut out. And he actually drew the inspiration for this scene from him and his high school friends. I think they used to kind of do something similar. I don't know if they were all in the car like this, banging their heads, but it sounded like they had different parts that they would kind of mouth to the song. And so he really wanted this piece to be in there. And I think it is one of those highlight pieces. And I don't remember what podcast I was listening to or something, but there was somebody on who was kind of like this expert in Queen and mentioned that although Queen was massive, don't get me wrong. I mean, they were huge. But by 1992, they had kind of fallen. People weren't really listening to them. People weren't really following them as much as they were in the mid 80s. And this spurred on a whole new generation of people that began to appreciate Queen's work and what they did simply because of the scene and the popularity of Wayne's World.
Hey, just a little minor fact check for you there. The clapper is still available from all major retailers, including Amazon and Walmart. What? In fact, Bed Bath & Beyond holds the rare clapper license for Star Wars, so you can get a Darth Vader plug-in clapper even today for $15.79 at your local retailer.
Does this guy know how to party or what?
Hey, same company that owns the clapper owns Chia Pets.
I can't. That does not surprise me.
It's a powerhouse conglomerate.
Do they own the Shammy or what is it? ShamWow?
ShamWow.
ShamWow. They probably own that one too.
Yeah. That's a sad story.
I will say the very first MP3 I've ever listened to was Bohemian Rhapsody.
Was it? See, there you go. Yeah. I mean, it did. It really did make a lot of people kind of open their ears and say, "Who's this Queen band that I've heard about, but maybe didn't really pay much attention to now that I'm getting older?"
Albert, what was the first MP3 you listened to? Do you recall the first MP3 you downloaded?
I went to, I think I actually do know this. I was, it was around 2000, and I was really wanting to get into more classic 70s rock. And the one band that I had never really touched on at the time was Led Zeppelin. And so I went on to Napster and downloaded every single album. I'm sorry if I'm going to incriminate myself here, but I downloaded everything from Led Zeppelin at the time. And just went on a binge of listening to Led Zeppelin nonstop, didn't listen to anything else, and really just try to understand and appreciate why they were so huge, which I do today. I mean, I'm glad I did. But that was the band that I was like, holy crap, I can download the entire catalog onto my iPod. That's where I'm going first.
Wow.
What about you? Do you remember?
Yeah, and I should have picked something deeper. So the first thing I ever downloaded is MP3. No, it was like this comedy thing where this guy was saying, "You ready to raise up and get your travel on? Peep this, Delta." You never seen these? You never heard that?
No.
Look, when you're offline, go look for it. He's like, "These big, fat, round-ass planes be flying so deep in the sky, you thought it was raining."
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Dude, you got to listen to this. It's the first MP3 I ever downloaded. It's ridiculous. You can find it on YouTube relatively easy.
All right. I'm going to say you win.
Google Peep Delta.
Mine was deep, but yours is funnier.
This is mono audio quality. I'm not even sure I don't know if the internet knows who uploaded that file, but I must have heard it 1,000 times.
Yeah. It just immaculate conception. I've got a couple other slides here of Wayne's World. These are just some moments, some of the funnier moments for me. You know, the hairnets. I got an extensive collection of hairnets and name tags. Right. This is you say this a lot, and I don't know if you realize it, but you say, "Oh yes, it will be mine." Do you realize you say this?
Oh yeah.
at the drop
I
of a
do.
hat sometimes. Yeah, this is where it's from. So that's, Wayne saying that. This is the pork scene. I definitely smell a pork product. This is a very quotable movie too, by the
You're
way.
not actually showing things. You know that, right?
I'm not showing anything.
You're just watching your monitor, and
Yeah.
we're staring at you while you just. We can almost see him in the reflection of your glasses. I just need you to tilt your head upward
Well, okay,
slightly.
let's go back here. So here's the we'll start over. Let's start the show. Wayne's World, 1990. No, I'm kidding. This is here's the name tags, here nets. Here's the oh yes, you will be mine. That's the same look you give, by the way, too.
Blue steel.
Yeah, you definitely would get points for the way you do that one. And here's the I definitely smell a pork product of some sort. I smell bacon. And this is the stuff. This is the comedy I think that does hold up well. It's when they get into like the really point in time type references that I don't think do so well, but they're still pretty good. Here's Al Bundy, who's actually reprising this role like in the skits originally on Saturday Night Live. He played the same character, that the guy that owned a donut shop, and they would bring him on in the Saturday Night Live skits, and so he came back and reprised his role for the movie, which he delivers this line about, why is it when you kill somebody in war, it's an act of bravery or something, but when you do it out of the passion of love, you call your murder. This is another one of my favorite ones. I don't know why. I just think this is hilarious about, I don't even own a gun.
Psycho hose monster.
Yeah. I don't even own a gun, let alone mini guns that would necessitate a entire rack, which I think is great. There's Bob from Fight Club, a.k.a. Meatloaf, who makes an appearance as one of the bouncers there at the, what was the name of that club? The gas something?
Gaslight, I think.
Gas?
I think it was Gaslight.
It's the gas something. All right. Anyways, that's him. This is the swing moment, which was, again, these are little things they did on the episodes of Saturday Night Live. There's Claudia Schiffer. It's always funny. I thought this scene was hilarious. Like this,
You're gonna want some love on that.
This is the Cantonese scene where he starts speaking, and I think again, this is one of those things I think is funny because you get the sense that he hasn't really learned a lot of Cantonese, and he ends up speaking with. And I don't even have some of the words on here. Like some of the words he's using are very complex words that you wouldn't expect somebody to kind of learn.
The funny part of that was just when he just said a little bit of things, and then the subtitles just kept going and going and going.
Yes, it was very like Airplane or Police Quest or Naked Gun kind of thing. It's something you would see there. I like their use of like breaking the third barrier too. Right, they spoke to the audience a lot, which I thought was really cool. And they do that throughout. This is the scene where they're sitting on the car and he's talking about, do you ever find Bugs Bunny dressed as a girl attractive? And I'm paraphrasing here. That line was actually improvised by Dana Carvey.
She's quite the babe. In French, she would be.
Oh yeah, that shtick is again. That's
She's
I'm glad you brought that up.
Babe.
That is right out of the
president. She'd be Abraham Lincoln.
That's right. This was a big deal for us, Will, because in '92, right, we were still in San Antonio, and we were like, "Whoa, look at the Alamo there, getting some more attention." We hadn't had anything since Cloak and Dagger.
Yep, getting the Six Flags love in the background too. A little history for you.
Six Flags. This is a No Stairway to Heaven, which I thought when this came out, I thought this was a reference to like, okay, it's a song that everybody tries to play whenever they go into a music store. And it turns out that it was actually a licensing thing. Like they couldn't play. They were trying to play. He was going to play "Stairway to Heaven" in this scene, and they were trying to negotiate with how many notes they could play. But because of licensing rights or whatever, they couldn't. They weren't allowed to. And so the joke was that I never caught that. I thought again it was just that this is something like it was cliche for you to play "Stairway to Heaven."
Cool
story,
that's
bro.
How the joke came off to me.
Yeah, that's how I read it too.
Well, there you go.
Of course, I didn't have the whole internet in front of me at the time.
That's right. This is Garth playing the drums, which I did not know he actually played those freaking drums in the scene. He is
That's really
very
Dana Carvey?
Yeah, he's a very, very versed in drum techniques and percussion. So go back and watch it. It blows your mind. You're like, what the heck? It's like Neil Peart kind of playing. All right, maybe not that. I'm getting out of hand.
Easy killer.
Yeah, I know. The product placement in here, I mean, this is good stuff, and this still holds true today. And there's this one. I didn't put them all in here, but there's this one. They did the Pizza Hut thing, the Pepsi thing. Garth when he's like dressed in that full headgear, head to toe in Reebok gear, I think is pretty great. And then the one that really doesn't really hold up well these days is the Neoprene one, which I think is the funniest one. But I remember the commercials where they would say they were all in black and white and little, yellow, different. I mean, they give you the tagline, but today nobody knows what new print is. I don't even know if it's still around.
Stand by.
All right, you get on that one. Here's the Laverne and Shirley one. This is a great piece as well that they
That
actually
was also
went
a bit
down
dated.
It is. It's hard to find people that know what Laverne and Shirley is today. So it's hard to find people that would really appreciate what they did here. But
I made my girls watch American Graffiti on vacation.
Yeah.
Just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, you kind of have to force them to do that. But the way they shot this too it's great. I mean, it's like a frame by frame. You could lay them one over another. The guys are throwing some quotes in there. Asphincter says what? That's another. And thanks, Juan. JR, I did skip over the Grey Poupon commercial, but that is unless you grew up in the 80s and 90s, you would not know what they were referring to there whatsoever. It'd go right over your head, I guarantee you. Here's Chris Farley in his first episode. He makes the most out of nothing in this scene too, by the way. But that's Chris Farley, though, right? I mean,
yeah. He's one of the funniest comedians in history.
Yeah, he is so good.
Physical actor too.
Hey, just so you know, you can no longer get new print unless you go on eBay, in which case you can find it for $8. But as a public service announcement, I'm going to tell your listeners, never buy medical supplies on eBay.
I want to know what the expiration date is on that. I'm sure it's pretty high it's expired. I guarantee you.
1987.
This is does this guy know how to party or what? That it's funny, the story behind this, and I don't have all the details. But
August 2021, just so you know. Still
really?
Good. August 2021.
Act now. Supplies are limited.
$8. There's more than 8 in stock.
The story here is Alice Cooper was coming on. He thought he was going to have do a live performance, and they kind of threw these lines in front of him last minute and said, "Here's what you need to memorize." And it turns out he's actually a history buff, and so this was not a big deal for him. But I think he does an amazing job here. I know it's not a lot, and I'm probably, giving him way too much credit, but I think it's really hysterical when you see him come on stage the way he is, and you think of Alice Cooper and the performance he gives of like that's right, Peter. Yes, Pete, it is. I think one of the most interesting aspects of Milwaukee is that they've had whatever, blah blah.
I think just because someone looks a certain way, they can't be well versed in something like history.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. Until you talk to them,
yeah,
that's how my brain thinks sometimes, unfortunately. But that line of does this guy know how to party? I think I've used that on you, Will, at least 3 times since you've been back on the show. So
at least
it is every time I get a chance to work it in. This is an unapologetic picture of Tia Carrera, who sang all these songs. I didn't know that either. I thought it was dubbed, but yeah,
she's terrible.
That's terrible. This is good music.
No,
she's actually got Emmys for singing like Hawaiian music.
Yeah, but not for this.
What was the name of the band?
I don't know.
I forgot now. Dang it! It was a really cheesy '80s band. Jeremy, you're on that one. Get on that one, will you? Yeah. Let's see here, and then this is the ending, which I don't know.
Brilliant. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree whatsoever. Because I mean, again, this is the Scooby-Doo reference, and then just doing the different endings, and doing the that little thing when they were.
That guy looks so much like a Scooby-Doo villain.
Oh, absolutely, Old Man Scruthers or Old Man Smithers or whatever they call him in the movie.
So this scene in the movie got me in the feels the same way that Ernest Cline gets me in the feels when he brings up a reference that's obscure that I think is talking directly to me. Same thing, because I love Scooby-Doo. Love it. Yep. Not the new Scooby-Doo, right? Not the pornographic Scooby-Doo. The old Harlem Globetrotter Scooby-Doo.
Oh, you're talking about the movies.
No, the cartoons.
Wait, what pornographic cartoon are you looking at?
Scooby-Doo.
Look, I got the whole internet on this side of my computer.
Oh my goodness! I don't
There's
want to
stuff out there.
The band's name was Crucial Taunt.
Crucial Taunt. Yeah, that's it. It's a great band. Why they never made it, I don't know. Let's see.
Maybe watch Wayne's World too.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think she does come back in there, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't talk about like the Robert Patrick cameo. That was a clear reference to Terminator 2. Him kind of reprising the role of the T-1000. There's a moment in there when they're showing Garth's desk, his computer. He's on the computer. There's a Game Gear with a TV tuner plugged in. I think he's using that somehow to, like, when he's talking about bouncing the satellites or the signal from the satellites. That was kind of cool. The other scene, and the last one is just for me, and I know I'm kind of monopolizing the time here, but the flashlight scene I think is brilliant, where he walks up slowly and then he takes a flashlight and he disassembles it and holds everybody back. You know, it's kind of, I don't know. It's great stuff. Great stuff.
I'd forgotten that Garth was just like such a technological genius.
Yeah, he is. It's the silent type that you got to watch.
Well,
out
he's
for.
he's older, right? So I think Dana Carvey's like 8 years older than Wayne is. So I think they were both in their 30s when this movie came out.
Right, and I think originally the show was they were supposed to be like high school kids, and then they got away from that and said they were, you know, out of school somehow in their 20s, living in mom and dad's basement doing the Aurora public access show. I've got a picture up here of the NES, the Super Nintendo, the Genesis one. There's the Aerosmith, and this was ranked as the #1 Saturday Night Live moment of all time by Saturday Night Live, I guess by NBC when they did this thing about, I don't know, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago now. Maybe there's been one that's been better, but this was like the #1 Aerosmith doing a cameo on Wayne's World. And I think the story was Tom Hanks was the host, and Hanks was supposed to be the cousin of Garth, and Hanks's character was was a roadie for Aerosmith, and that's how he was able to get him on to the Wayne's World, the public access show. And then there's part 2, which I understand. Have you guys seen part 2? Any good? Recommend it?
It's been years. I don't think it was as good as part 1, but
No.
I still enjoyed it. But
It wasn't good enough to make a part 3.
No, good point. All right, did I miss anything? I think we covered that pretty extensively, but
I think you could have watched the movie in the time that we discussed it.
yeah. Party on, Albert.
party on, Jeremy. All right, let's talk about this one. This is the name of the episode. May the Force be with you. MTFBWYA. I mentioned this coming on prior to us coming on the air, and it's actually, and I don't mean this as a bad thing at all, but it's funny when you talk about you talk to people that are really into Star Wars, like Star Wars, and you mention the MTFBWYA, and a lot of people don't know what you're talking about, and then when you say it, they're like, "Oh, crap! It was a snake; it would have bit me." They don't realize that that's the acronym, and it stands for, obviously, "May the Force be with you," which is a Star Wars reference. And I just want to show you one thing too. So anytime you go, well, I shouldn't say anytime, but a lot of the times when you get when you meet Ernie Klein and he signs something for you, and I'll put this up right there. He actually signs it that way. So this one says to Albert. Oh, thank you. You brought yours too. Does this say the same thing, Will?
Yep.
Yep. So we're showing ours here. You've got Ready Player One. I have the Ready Player One as well, but my son's got it upstairs. He's reading it. But this is the Armada book that I have, where he signed it as well. So, we know that he's a big Star Wars fan, obviously, but it's kind of cool that he does sign it just the way that the way Parzival signs the letter in Chapter 12 that he sends to Artemis here.
All right, so, and maybe those Star Wars nerds are correct, because the line, "May the Force be with you always," appears in exactly 0 Star Wars movies, right? So it exists nowhere. However, fellow Gunters, it's time for our weekly game.
Oh, no.
So here's what we're going to do. Albert versus Jeremy, I am going to give you trivia related specifically to "May the Force be with you." All right?
Okay.
May the Force be with you. And it's all going to be about the movies. So here we go. And we're going to do it chronologically in time of release, not in crazy, put it all the prequels in order. So we're going to start at 4. Here we go. Who's the first person in a Star Wars movie to say, "May the Force be with you"? Albert.
General Dodonna.
Oh, yes. Circle gets the square.
Well, he's like, yeah, I mean, he's like the precursor. He's the one that does it all. And he's like one of the few people that actually says the whole thing.
All right, Jeremy, yours is going to be slightly easier. All right.
Wait, get the
In
hard one.
episodes 4 through 6, which of the following characters never say, "May the Force be with you"? Is it Luke? Is it Han? Is it Obi-Wan?
Oh, I know this one.
Obi-Wan.
Luke.
Out. Nope. There's a reason Jeremy has scored. The score is 1-1. It is Obi-Wan. It is
He
Obi-Wan.
says the Force will be with you.
Always.
Always,
And he will
yeah.
always say, "Luke, the Force will be with you." And he says, "Use the Force, Luke." And he does say, "Remember, the Force will be with you always," but he never says, "May the Force be with you." All right. With that, Albert, what character throughout the 7 films says, "May the Force be with you" the most?
I want to say it'd be somebody like, go with Yoda.
Yoda? Yoda is tied for second. Would you like to take a guess, Jeremy?
Out of the 7 films, so you mean 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7?
Yep.
Because I watch it in machete order.
Machete order.
I don't even know what that means.
It's a deep cut. Keep going.
Yeah. I don't know. Out of those, I would have
Don't
to
worry, I'll
say
cut all the silence out.
Obi-Wan, I'm guessing, because
It is.
Yeah,
Although
he was-
Obi-Wan does not say it in episodes 4 through 6, he says it a ton of times in the prequels. So there you go.
Who
Him
was
and
in
Anakin
that
exchanged. Sorry, I was saying him and Anakin exchange it at least
That
2
is-
times that I think of.
Excellent. So 2 more questions for you. Here we go. All right. In which film is it never said? Either one of you. Up for grabs.
It's never said?
It's not said at all in one of the films. Which film did they never say, "May the Force be with you"?
Okay, so I'm going to just, let me pause the game for a second.
Albert, you're behind. You're behind to a Transformer guy.
I'm going to,
And
I
you-
was going to say The Rise of Skywalker, but
Rise of Skywalker. Is that where you're going with? Final
yeah,
answer?
Rise of Skywalker.
All right, Jeremy, what's your guess?
this is just the numbered movies.
Yes.
I was gonna say Rise of Skywalker, but I'll just say Last Jedi. Just to,
Oh, it's actually
more
Return of the Jedi. The closest we get to it is Admiral Akbar saying, "May the Force be with us." So there you go.
See, I would
All
count
right.
that. Wait, so where do they say it in The Rise of Skywalker?
I don't know. I didn't look that up.
Okay,
I didn't look that up.
I don't think they say it in that. I don't think they say it in that, but
All right, fine. Fast
Your
money
game.
round. This is for all the marbles. We're up. I'm going to list some movies. You tell me whether or not "May the Force be with you" is said in the film.
okay.
All right. We're gonna
Just
start
any
with
movie
Albert.
whatsoever?
Yep. I'm going to
Just
list
to
some
both of
movies.
us?
I'm going to go with you, Albert, first, and then
Okay.
I'm going to go. Ready? Here we go. Albert, Cocoon.
Yes.
No. Jeremy,
I'm thinking Last
Armageddon.
Starfighter.
yes.
Correct. Albert, Hackers.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Fine. Hacker.
All right.
Get out of here.
Space Camp. Jeremy.
Yes. Why do you give them all the easy ones? It sucks. I hate this game, man. I quit.
Jeremy has dominated the Gunters and has earned the aluminum key.
The aluminum key. Congratulations, Jeremy. I will concede the win. Although I got questions. I don't know. There's some holes in this.
I'll send you the references. I hyperlinked them because I figured you would be that guy.
Well, I still have a problem. We need to look at The Rise of Skywalker. I don't recall them saying it, and that one is fresh in my mind because we've just done like 15 episodes on The Rise of Skywalker. But this is my favorite moment here when "May the Force be with you" is used, and it's a take. I know there are people out there that say "May the Force be with you" has to be said in that order. I don't prescribe to that. I think it's any variation thereof. I count it.
Yeah.
But this is Jin's "May the Force be with us," which I think is it's one of my favorite movies of Star Wars, and I love this scene because this is them. This is the rebels being rebellious in the rebellion, if you will, when she does this because they're breaking rank and going off to do what they were told not to do to begin with, anyways. I do want to talk about this too. So this is May the 4th be with you. So for those of you that are not aware, this is a day that's been celebrated now. It's publicly acknowledged by Disney. A long time it wasn't. It was just kind of at conventions and that kind of thing. So, and then there's also some variations of, Revenge of the 5th, Revenge of the 6th. I'm more of a Revenge of the 6th guy than Revenge of the 5th because 6 sounds like Sith, but I don't know.
And
Jeremy,
the 5th should technically be Empire, so I don't know. I think they got to work that out.
I don't know.
And Albert, you are correct. I fact checked myself, and I was supposed to stipulate episodes 4 through 6.
Oh.
So you are correct. I have downloaded the script and cross-referenced it. It is not said in Rise of Skywalker either. You still lose by 2 points.
Oh, that's fine. Whatever. I'm fine with losing. That's not the first time in my life. But Jeremy, you said you were more of a fifth or sixth guy.
Well, I mean, being from the South as I am, fifth sometimes can sound like Sith, but I think because, Jedi was originally Revenge of the Jedi, and it's the sixth movie, Revenge of the Sixth just seems like it should be the Star Wars geeky, decision.
Play on words, yeah. All right, well, let's get into our final topic, and I know we've got, we're coming up on the 2-hour mark, but we've got at least 45 more minutes left to talk about the Dark Crystal. No, I'm kidding. Let's talk about the Dark Crystal. This is a movie, give me the reference here. Kira was born and raised in London. Her birth name was Karen, but she insisted on being called Kira ever since her first viewing of the Dark Crystal. And this was a movie, came out in 1982, directed by Jim Henson and Frank Oz. The story was by Jim Henson, which, man, says a lot about this guy. His
daughter. They actually did it. The first treatment was done at an airport. Both him and his daughter worked on it together.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So it's starring Stephen Garlick, Lisa Maxwell, Billy Whiteclaw, Percy Edwards, and Moki from Fraggle Rock. Catherine Mullen is the voice of Kira herself, which I don't know, it's interesting that she's not like one of the forefront characters, but I guess she doesn't come until later on in the movie. Let me give this story synopsis, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Will, because I know this.
I've got a story synopsis for you.
Oh, hit it then. Hit it.
All right. So the plot of this movie, if you haven't seen it, is your basic Lord of the Shards story. It's your usual Gelfling adventure that takes place a long time ago on a planet far, far away. Following the death of the Master, which is basically a four-armed Fraggle, Jin's mission is to find a shard and shove it into a rock worshipped by both reptilian Skeksis and these hipster mystics alike. Along the way, he hooks up with Kira, this winged chick, and her dog, Fizzlebub. I don't even remember what his name was. He meets a crazed... I don't remember what his name was. A crazed Whoopi Goldberg using Yoda speak named Aughra. And then rides on the back of a Landstrider, which looks like the thing out of Nightmares. Ultimately, Jin needs to get to the Castle of Crystals and repair it with the shard before the Great Conjunction Junction, or the Demon Gonzo race will rule for eternity. He does, the castle falls, the hero survives, and balance is restored. Roll credits. There you go, Albert.
Fizz Gig. Is that what it is?
Fizz Gig. There you go.
That's the stupid dog.
Excellent. So this is I love this movie. There are moments of this movie that, for me, they're incredibly memorable. If you've seen Labyrinth, you'll see a lot of crossover with some of the animation techniques used between the two, because they follow basically the same... They use the same artistic design. They use a lot of the same set design for both of those movies. So just about everybody who was a little person that played an Ewok at some point played a Gelfling in this movie for the wide shots.
Oh, nice.
So there you go. All right, Albert, what do you remember about the Dark Crystal? What's the most memorable scene from this film?
Well, I'm gonna go through some of these, and I've got I added some more. I mean, you sent me over some of them, and I think you captured some of the moments that I remember. Well, let me first start by saying this movie scared the living crap out of me as a kid, and I was already like 9 years old. I saw Jim Henson, I saw Frank Oz, I knew who they were because the Muppets were huge in the 70s. This is right after I think this is right after the Great Muppet Caper.
They were filmed back to back. Were they? The Great Muppet Caper and this movie were filmed back to back. So imagine that. You're filming the Great Muppet Caper, leaving that set, and then you're like, let's go do the Dark Crystal.
And they're so different. And like, when it came out, I just remember it being kind of a big deal and just was not expecting this. And to this day, there are a lot of moments in this movie that are really creepy, I guess is for lack of a better term.
And this movie was designed to scare, right? So Jim Henson's philosophy was it's unhealthy for children not to experience fear. So that's one of the reasons he made this movie, which is disturbing.
Well, and I think there's story elements that I think are scary, but then there are other just like the physical of it all, like the aesthetics of it and the imagery and the lighting and the sound and all that stuff. That's a whole different. It feels like a different thing. It felt like a different thing for me. But even now watching it, like I hadn't watched it in a while prior to doing the research for the show, and it was still kind of like I don't know that I would put my kids in one. I don't know that they would watch it, but I don't know that they would like this movie. But I don't know. Maybe I could be wrong. So Jeremy, before I go any further, what about you? Was this a movie that you watched growing up? I mean, what's your experience with it? Did you like it? Do you still like it? Do you think it holds up well?
I have never seen it.
Really? Did you watch it for the show though? Right?
You have
no. I missed it. I watched Wayne's World instead.
Oh,
you gotta pick one of these two.
I was never one as a kid for scary movies, and I was aware of it. I think it was on like HBO a lot. I never had HBO except for the scrambled kind that you watch.
Yeah,
that's Cinemax.
We know what you were really watching, Jeremy. But go on, please.
But yeah, I never like. I'm aware of it in the pop culture, but I've never actually seen the movie. It's something that I've wanted to see, especially as they had the Netflix series that came out recently.
Well, don't worry, because we're about to educate you on the Dark Crystal, and
okay,
you'll be able to make a educated decision as to whether or not you want to invest any time into watching this creepy thing. Oh my goodness!
I'm looking to see where it's streaming right now.
Yeah, I don't know if it is, but let me go through some of these pictures here. So you've got the Xerxes here, and this scene was kind of creepy. Not only is it creepy, but it's freaking gross. Like the way they eat, and it was all purposeful. I get it. He was trying to show, just how disgusting they were.
So in the original treatment, there was only 7 Xerxes, and there was only 7 mystics, and the 7 Xerxes were supposed to represent the 7 deadly sins. So you can associate each one of them in the film with a sin. So the one who's the grossest here is obviously Sloth, right? The guy that just more food.
Yeah, now that you say that, I didn't know that, but now that you say that, I'm already picturing like some of the other ones and what the sins they were probably representing.
I ended up going to 9 for balance, and then of course expanded the number of Xerxes for the Netflix special.
Okay, this moment here, I mean, terrifying.
Terrifying.
I mean, this is this crap out of nightmares, and they don't pull any punches either. I mean, they show this thing start getting. This is like right out of Raiders of the Lost Ark when the faces melt, right? It starts getting like the face starts getting crunched in, and then the essence is getting drained and sucked right out of him. It's a liquid, and then dude chugs it. I mean, this is terrifying stuff for me, I think, as a 9-year-old. And it's still terrifying. I mean, these creatures, what are they, the pondlings or whatever?
Yeah.
They're kind of creepy just alone, much less once they get their faces sucked like this by the dark crystal.
So every podling was actually sculpted off of a potato. They were all potato inspired.
They seem like they're like lost cousins of the Dozers. And there's a lot of...
So interesting you bring up the Dozers, because the Dozers that were used in Fraggle Rock, which came later, were originally designed for this film. So they ended up cutting about 20 to 40 minutes out of the original cut of this film. Like, you can't even find it anymore. But one of them was going underground, and they meet the Dozers. So that character art and those characters are carried over to Fraggle Rock.
Yeah. Oh, and so JR's he says the Emperor in bed dying is still super creepy. Don't worry, buddy, I got you covered, because I have a picture of the Emperor in that bed, because I agree it was really pretty gross. What are we looking at here? Well, this is something I wasn't aware of.
So I thought you'd get a kick out of this. You know, ILM did a lot of the backgrounds for the Dark Crystal. They were doing work in England at the time, so they were able to bring a lot of the production crew came in from England from very big films, and ILM was there. And ended up on the scientist's mask, actually used in place of his eyeball. They used a part of a TIE fighter.
Yep, they took the wings off, left the cockpit there, and put it in his eye.
Which I didn't know until I was doing research for this.
That is pretty cool.
But I thought you'd like that because, Star Wars.
It's always amazing to find out, like, when they, like, filmmakers use little pieces of something else.
Yeah.
And you're never even supposed to notice.
Yeah, they'll do it like right in your face, you won't see it, or they'll do it in the background, and it's almost like a cameo for that piece. They do it a lot of times with sounds and music as well, like music, sound effects, and all that. That's always good stuff to dig into. Oh my goodness! So these are the Landstriders. I think I have a picture. No, I didn't get one of them walking, but the way they walk or way they run is like really. I mean, this is truly the stuff of nightmares. And these are the nice creatures that they ride on to get away, and even when they're fighting, it looks really spooky, and the way they all kind of converge on it and kill it, and
it is.
This is from the same mind that created Sesame Street.
Exactly, and that's what I mentioned earlier. When I see this, you think Jim Henson, you're thinking, oh, the Muppets, right? And that's a family program, and then you get this stuff, which is like, and to your point, I mean, I guess if he's trying to scare people, that'll do it right there.
So
what the hell
Jim Henson made all of the puppets for this movie, but he didn't necessarily design them. So that was designed by a different guy. So the artistic director did those designs, was upset. What is his name? Stroud or Howard? I don't remember what his name is. But that dude was obsessed with crustaceans. So a lot of the monsters you'll see throughout the film actually have elements from crustaceans.
Right, like the Garthams.
Yeah, and those demon landwalker things, which were originally going to have 6 legs, but they couldn't figure out a way to make that work with 2 people.
Oh, so they stuck to the 2. Here's the Whoopi Goldberg character.
There she is.
Aughra,
which is obviously just a deviation of ogre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she's got the eyeball that she could take out and stick wherever she wanted. And that was, if her face wasn't creepy enough, she's got that eyeball.
That was a big Yoda voice ripoff. It was like they were just recycling voices at that time. Yeah. Looks like Gelfling. Smells like Gelfling.
There you go, JR. That's for you right there.
Oh my God.
There's a scene, Jeremy, where there's an emperor that's kind of dying, and even the way he dies is spooky. Like this is like moments before he dies, and he's old and he's decrepit and everything, and then eventually his body is like his whole face just kind of collapses in and crumbles. But they don't. It's horrifying.
It's how I hope to pass.
It's
in a very similar fashion.
Yep. Let's see. All right. We didn't get to talk about the movie much. I mean, okay. So my overall thoughts on the movie is, it's a very like I would say it's very the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell type tale, right? I mean, there's nothing that unique about it. There's a lot of stuff that I think was laid, and you can probably speak to this more, Will, but there was a lot of stuff that seems like it was laid down, put there for a reason, and never expanded upon, either because it was cut out or there were plans to do it later on in a sequel, prequel, whatever. But there's a lot of world building, and it kind of speaks to Jim Henson's mind and what he was able to do. So I do appreciate the film from that perspective and how much he was able to give us. And not to say it's a bad film either. Like, this thing is, it sits pretty favorably with the critics for the most part. Even when it came out, it kind of did well, but I don't know that it did I think it was just, it turned off a lot of people because it was kind of spooky, especially for, targeting 8 to, or even younger, right? Think about it, targeting 6-7-year-olds all the way up to like 10, 13. Unless you're like a teenager or you just really you're pretty stout and can, take a punch. I don't know that this movie really doesn't impact you in a lot of different ways, or at least make you feel kind of weird or creeped out by some of the characters that you saw. And if that was really the point, then I think they did a great job with it.
Yeah, and so Jim Henson said from the beginning that this story was intended to be standalone, that the story of the characters was to be standalone, and there was never going to be a sequel to the movie. But he did acknowledge that the world that he built had stories to tell as a prequel. So he set that up right at the beginning. And to your point, not hugely successful, at least here in the United States. It cost $15 million to produce and ended up with about $40 million in return, right? But in some countries, including Japan, it was the highest grossing film of the year. Here in the United States, it wasn't, because it was competing against this little film called E.T.
E.T., yeah.
Yeah, so they did what they could. Yeah.
They did the best they could, yeah. And then I've got some other things here. So there was a text-based game that came out I think it was for the Apple and the Atari systems, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct.
So that's the one in the top left-hand corner. It was text-based. There was no graphics, although I found a color version, which I'd never seen. I'd only ever seen the black and white or the monochrome version of the logo. There was other things here that I found too that I didn't know. I've got a picture of a board game up, the Dark Crystal board game. I don't know what that's about. But interesting, we all know about the Age of Resistance, which I think is the Netflix one.
Yes.
And I've heard a lot of great things about it, especially from people that are fans of the series. I'm a fan of the Dark Crystal, so I just have never got a chance to watch it, to be honest. But I definitely would like to check that out at some point.
Is it Mark Hamill in it?
Yeah, I think Mark Hamill does some voice. He does some voice work in there. Yes, and I think I've seen pictures of him, either on set or BTS type stuff where he was there. There's I think some novels that came out. I mean, more recently probably. I know there were some novels that came out around that same time. There was a trading card game that never took off. It was like planned and never made it, like a trading card collectible game type thing. There's the one that really surprised me that I had just no I didn't even realize was even out there, which is the one up here, this Dark Crystal Age of Resistance Tactics. So this is a video game that's out, and I saw it came out on the Switch, Xbox One, PlayStation. It's on Steam, Mac OS, which is kind of cool. I can play that. Did you guys ever play this? Either of you ever heard of it or played it?
No.
Nope, I've played neither. Although I do know the Dark Crystal board game has got terrible reviews.
So yeah, I mean, there's
It's no Escape the Death Star, if that's
Buy it.
that's for sure.
You can buy it on Steam for $20.
$20.
$19.99. It is. Looks like a kind of RPG-ish kind of game.
Yeah,
Final Fantasy Tactics.
yeah, exactly. That's what I see. I see Tactics, and I think, okay, Final Fantasy Tactics.
It's a turn-based strategy game.
Yeah. So probably they're probably just playing on that game, but it's out there. So I mean, the Dark Crystal, like I guess just to kind of put a bow on this, I mean, it's definitely a movie that I enjoyed. I enjoyed as a kid. Again, it did creep me out. There's a lot of we didn't even touch on all the scenes here. There's plenty of them, even from when Kira got stabbed. And I guess to take it back to the novel, he mentions that Karen took the name of Kira, who is a cool character. I mean, she doesn't really do a whole lot, I guess. I mean, she helps Jen along the way. She's got wings, which we didn't know she did. That was kind
She
of
talks to animals. She can talk to any animal, so
That's
that's a
true, yeah.
superpower.
That's how that comes in handy there at the very end.
So in the movie, she's actually not speaking some made-up language. She's speaking Croatian. Like,
Really?
You can actually translate everything she says in her crazed language.
Why did they
It's
go with
just-
Croatian? Do you know?
I don't know. It's before the internet, and I guess they didn't think the average American would know. But to their point, you didn't. So
Right.
1 point for Jim Henson.
I wonder what that was like when they did the Croatian version.
They just dubbed it in English.
They dubbed it in English.
Maybe they did. All right. Jeremy, any final thoughts? No, I'm kidding. Will, any final thoughts on the Dark Crystal here?
No, sir. I'm out of useless trivia.
I never thought
Also,
that
you
would.
can rent it on most platforms for around $3. So I'll be doing that this weekend.
All right, do it. Let us know what you think about it. Don't watch it with your kid. That would be the only word of advice here. Okay,
My
well,
kids
let's.
watched it. They liked it.
Did they? How long ago did
Yeah.
they see it?
Probably about a year ago, maybe.
All right.
I bought it because they did another. Was it a 4K release recently? And so I bought it and we watched it. It was fantastic.
I'll have to put it to the test, see how it holds up. All right. I think that's going to do it for this episode. I went a little bit longer than we wanted to. But, Jeremy, before we go, where can the folks find you and all the work that you're doing over there on Transmissions Podcast?
Well, they can find this on Transmissions at transmissionspodcast.com. And we are in every podcast directory that, where you can get your podcasts.
On FidoNet, though? No, go
what?
on. Sorry. Nothing.
No, we're not on FidoNet. And you can reach me on Twitter at yakko.org. That's YAKK0DOTORG.
Okay, now you got to tell them, where is that from?
Animaniacs.
Yeah. So you're a big Animaniacs fan.
I am.
Who wouldn't know that? Anyone
Some
that's in
folks.
your podcast is going to know that.
Yeah. It's also my domain name for my podcast. I haven't released an episode in 2 years, but yeah. So,
Cool.
Yeah, Rob Paulson's a cool guy. I got to interview him.
I think I've actually listened to that. Did you release that one?
Yeah, that was like a year ago.
Yeah. No, I did listen to that one. All that whole crew is awesome. Like, they're really great people from the Animaniacs crew. All right. Well, thank you for being here, Jeremy. Thanks
this was
for.
fun.
Yeah, no, appreciate you coming back on the show and talking. We didn't get to talk Transformers much. Maybe early on we did, but not in this show. So
We talked quite a bit before the show started.
yeah, we made up for it.
There's
Look at that. Show the one that you had. Sorry, you got to show the one that broke my heart. I can't
the same
believe
one.
poor bastard decided to make this toy.
So the current Earthrise Optimus Prime that I just showed.
Yep. There's Optimus.
They released a monochrome version.
He's dead,
to
Jeremy.
reflect
Just say it's a dead Optimus Prime. Don't say
it's
monochrome.
dead. You can see maybe the faceplate's a little cracked, and they released a dead version from the '86 movie.
That does not
horrible.
make any sense.
It doesn't. Like, salt in the
For
wound.
suckers like me.
Right. All right. Will, any final thoughts before we get out of here on Chapter 12 or any of the nonsense that we spoke about tonight?
Oh, no. I can't believe we had an episode where we talked about Wayne Garth, Santa Claus, all in the same episode. It's mind-boggling.
It really is. So good work there. All right. We'll be back next Thursday for Chapter 13. And I think we're actually going to combine these. I think we're going to try to do a 13, 14, 15, maybe even a 16.
No.
I say
Let's
that,
go with the 3.
I say that only because the number of pop culture references is dwindling, and it will continue to dwindle. It'll peak up here in a little bit later, but we're getting into an era of the book that's really more narrative than pop culture. So it makes sense that we would kind of combine some of these. So expect at least talk about Clark Kent, Peter Parker, Captain America, Revenge of the Nerds, which I can't wait to get into. Phantasm, which is a great movie, and Big Goals. So you got that to look forward to as well. But anyways, thank you all for all the people that tuned into the live show. Even if you just drop by to say hello or kind of see our ugly faces, we really appreciate that. And you can find us all on social media, all of the podcast catchers, and we'll put the show in the show notes. You'll have some links there for us as well. So we will see you guys next Thursday for 13, 14, 15, and maybe 16. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
The views and opinions of the Basement hosts are of our own and are not in any way affiliated with Random House or Ernest Klein. All quotes, music, sounds, trademarked, and copyrighted material referenced in the show are owned by the respectful companies and creators and are used by the Basement as fair use for entertainment purposes only. It would take me a month to read this whole disclaimer, but sad to say, I don't have that kind of time.